Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Golden Cage. Daniel Smith adjusted his tie for the third time as he stood outside the imposing Green family mansion. The evening sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, making the Tudor-style home look even more intimidating than usual. Tonight was Clifford Green's 65th birthday, and Daniel knew he was walking into another evening of barely concealed contempt. "You ready for this?" Rebecca asked, smoothing down her elegant black dress. Even after 5 years of marriage, she still took his breath away. Her auburn hair caught the light perfectly, and her green eyes sparkled with a mixture of love and apology. She knew what these family gatherings were like for him. "As ready as I'll ever be," Daniel replied, squeezing her hand. At 32, he'd learned to wear his poker face like armor. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccable, but he knew none of that mattered to the Green family. To them, he would always be the construction worker who somehow managed to steal their princess. The massive oak door opened before they could ring the bell. Alan Green, Rebecca's younger brother, stood in the doorway with his characteristic smirk. At 28, Alan had never worked a day in his life, living off the family's construction empire while pursuing what he called entrepreneurial ventures, which usually meant expensive failures funded by daddy's money. Well, if it isn't the happy couple," Alan said, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. "Dan, I see you managed to find a suit that almost fits." Daniel's jaw tightened, but Rebecca quickly intervened. "Alan, please. It's Dad's birthday." Of course. Come in. Dad's holding court in the study, regaling everyone with stories of his latest acquisition. Alan stepped aside, his eyes lingering on Daniel with undisguised amusement. The interior of the Green Mansion was a testament to old money and new arrogance. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoed from the main living room where the other guests had gathered. Daniel recognized most of the faces, business associates, country club friends, and various hangers-on who orbited the Green family fortune. These weren't people. They were an audience for Clifford Green's endless performance as the self-made king of construction. "Daniel, Rebecca." Gloria Green's voice rang out as she approached them. Rebecca's mother was a study in artificial perfection, every blonde hair lacquer in place, every wrinkle surgically erased, every smile calculated for maximum social impact. She air-kissed Rebecca before turning to Daniel with a look that could freeze fire. "Daniel," she said, her voice dropping several degrees. "How nice to see you." "Mrs. Green," Daniel replied evenly. He'd long ago stopped trying to win over his mother-in-law. Gloria Green had made it clear from day one that no man would ever be good enough for her daughter, especially not a blue-collar nobody who probably couldn't tell a fish fork from a salad fork. "Mom, please," Rebecca whispered, but Gloria was already scanning the room for more important people to greet. The centerpiece of the evening was clearly Clifford Green himself. At 65, he still cut an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of commanding presence that came from 40 years of building an empire from nothing. Green Construction had grown from a small family business into one of the largest commercial builders in the tri-state area, and Clifford never let anyone forget it. He stood near the fireplace, scotch in hand, surrounded by a circle of admirers hanging on his every word. His voice boomed across the room as he gestured expansively. "You see, the secret to success in this business isn't just knowing how to build," Clifford was saying. "It's knowing who to build for, when to build, and most importantly, how to spot the weak links before they can bring you down." Daniel felt Rebecca's hand tightening around his arm. They both knew that last comment was directed at him. "Take my latest project," Clifford continued, his eyes finding Daniel across the room. "The Meridian Tower downtown. 50-story mixed-use development, $200 million project. You don't get contracts like that by being soft or settling for mediocrity. You get them by being ruthless, by demanding excellence, and by never accepting anything less than the best." The crowd murmured appreciatively. and Clifford's chest swelled with pride. This was his kingdom, and everyone in it existed solely to acknowledge his greatness. "Speaking of excellence," said James Morrison, one of Clifford's golf buddies, "I heard that mysterious investment group finally revealed themselves as the primary backers for Meridian. Phoenix Holdings, wasn't it? Must be nice to have that kind of financial backing." Daniel nearly choked on his drink. Phoenix Holdings. The name he'd chosen 2 years ago when he'd started quietly acquiring shares in various construction projects. The name that was now printed on dozens of contracts that Clifford Green had no idea were connected to the son-in-law he loved to humiliate. "Phoenix Holdings, yes," Clifford said with a slight frown. "Anonymous investors. Probably some tech billionaire looking to diversify. The kind of people who throw money around without understanding the real work that goes into building something lasting." The irony was so thick Daniel could taste it. For the past 2 years, he'd been the anonymous force behind Phoenix Holdings, quietly building a portfolio of investments and acquisitions that would have made Clifford's head spin. Every dismissive comment, every snide remark, every family gathering where he was treated like an unwelcome charity case had fueled his determination to prove them all wrong. "Daniel?" Rebecca's voice broke through his thoughts. "You okay? You look a little pale." "Just thinking about work," he said, forcing a smile. It wasn't entirely a lie. Phoenix Holdings was work, the most important work of his life. As the evening progressed, Daniel found himself studying the dynamics of the room with new eyes. These people who looked down on him, who whispered about Rebecca's unfortunate choice in husbands, who treated him like an outsider. None of them had any idea that he controlled more wealth than most of them combined. The knowledge was intoxicating, but it was also isolating. He couldn't share his secret with Rebecca, not yet. She loved him for who she thought he was, a hardworking construction supervisor who'd managed to build a modest but comfortable life for them. If she knew the truth about his hidden empire, would she still love the man she married, or would she see him as another manipulator in a family full of them? "Ladies and gentlemen," Clifford's voice boomed across the room, "if I could have your attention for a moment." The crowd quieted, turning toward their host. Clifford raised his scotch glass, his face flushed with alcohol and self-satisfaction. "Tonight we celebrate not just another year of my life, but another year of the Green family legacy. 40 years ago, I started with nothing but a pickup truck and a dream. Today, Green Construction stands as a testament to what American ingenuity and determination can accomplish." Applause filled the room, and Clifford basked in the adoration. His eyes swept across the gathered faces before landing on Daniel, and his expression shifted slightly. "Of course, not everyone understands what it takes to build something lasting," he continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "Some people are content to coast on others' achievements, to marry into success rather than earn it themselves." The room fell uncomfortably silent. Rebecca's face flushed red, and Daniel felt every eye in the room turn toward him. This was it, the moment Clifford had been building toward all evening. The public humiliation disguised as a birthday toast. Daniel met Clifford's gaze steadily, his face betraying nothing of the storm brewing inside. Let the old man have his moment. Soon enough, Clifford Green would learn that some people were much more dangerous than they appeared. But enough about that, Clifford said with a dismissive wave. Tonight is about family, about legacy, about the people who truly matter. As the crowd began to relax and conversations resumed, Daniel excused himself to step outside onto the terrace. The cool night air helped clear his head and calm the rage that threatened to boil over. Rebecca followed him out, her face etched with embarrassment and anger. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, taking his hands in hers. "I don't know why he does this to you. You're twice the man he is." Daniel pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "It's okay, Becca. Really. But it wasn't okay." And tonight, for the first time, Daniel began to seriously consider what it would take to make Clifford Green understand exactly who he was dealing with. The game was about to change, and Clifford had no idea what was coming. Chapter 2. The Making of a Phoenix. 3 years earlier, Daniel Smith had been exactly what the Green family thought he was, a construction supervisor with calloused hands and big dreams. But what they never bothered to learn was that beneath his blue-collar exterior beat the heart of a financial genius. Daniel's transformation began on a rainy Tuesday morning when he'd been called to oversee the demolition of an old warehouse downtown. As he stood in the rubble, studying the blueprints for the luxury condos that would replace it, he'd noticed something that made his pulse quicken. The property values in this neighborhood were about to explode. That evening, in the cramped apartment he shared with Rebecca, Daniel had spread city planning documents across their kitchen table. Rebecca found him there at midnight, surrounded by zoning maps and development proposals. "What's all this?" she'd asked, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "The future," he'd said, pointing to a highlighted section of the map. "The city's planning a major transit hub 6 blocks from here. Property values are going to triple in the next 2 years, but nobody's talking about it yet." Rebecca had laughed, kissing the top of his head. "My brilliant husband, always seeing opportunities where other people see obstacles." She had no idea how right she was. Daniel had liquidated his savings, borrowed against everything he owned, and purchased 3 rundown properties in the area. When the transit hub was announced 6 months later, he sold 2 of the properties for a 400% profit and used the third as collateral for bigger investments. But real estate was just the beginning. Daniel had a gift for seeing patterns that others missed, for understanding the hidden connections between seemingly unrelated events. He studied market trends with the intensity of a scholar, reading financial journals until his eyes burned, learning to speak the language of money as fluently as he spoke construction. Within 18 months, his portfolio had grown from 3 shabby properties to a diversified investment empire worth over $50 million. And through it all, he maintained his cover as a simple construction supervisor, go to work every day with his lunch pail and hard hat, while secretly orchestrating deals that would have impressed Wall Street veterans. The creation of Phoenix Holdings had been born from necessity as much as strategy. As his wealth grew, Daniel needed a way to make larger investments without drawing attention to himself. The anonymous investment group provided the perfect cover, a mysterious entity that could acquire properties and fund projects without anyone connecting it to Daniel Smith, the blue-collar husband of Rebecca Green. The first major test had come when Green Construction was bidding on the Riverside Mall renovation. Daniel had quietly ensured that Phoenix Holdings became the primary financier for the project, watching with dark amusement as Clifford Green celebrated landing the biggest contract of his career without knowing his despised son-in-law was the one making it possible. From there, the game had become addictive. Daniel began deliberately targeting projects that would benefit Green Construction, positioning himself as the invisible puppeteer pulling the strings of Clifford's success. Every time Clifford boasted about his business acumen, every time he made a snide comment about Daniel's lack of ambition, Daniel would think about the contracts and financing that were flowing through Phoenix Holdings directly into Clifford's bank accounts. The irony was delicious, but it was also dangerous. The more successful Phoenix Holdings became, the more attention it attracted. Financial journalists had started asking questions about the mysterious investment group. Government regulators were beginning to take notice of their aggressive acquisition strategy. And most dangerously, Clifford Green himself was starting to pay attention to his biggest anonymous backer. Daniel had covered his tracks carefully. Phoenix Holdings was incorporated in Delaware, with layers of shell companies and offshore accounts that would take a forensic accountant months to unravel. His legal team consisted of lawyers who specialized in discretion and had no idea who they were really working for. Every transaction was meticulously documented and completely legal, but completely untraceable to Daniel Smith. The hardest part wasn't managing the money or avoiding detection. It was living the lie every day with Rebecca. She knew something had changed in their finances. Their modest apartment had given way to a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. Daniel had explained it as smart investments and a promotion at work, which was technically true. But the scale of the deception weighed on him constantly. Rebecca deserved better than lies, but she also deserved better than her family's treatment of her husband. Every time Clifford made another cutting remark, Every time Gloria looked at Daniel like he was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe, Daniel reminded himself that he was protecting Rebecca from the ugly truth about her family's willingness to accept him only when it benefited them. The Meridian Tower project had been the culmination of 2 years of careful planning. When the initial financing fell through, Daniel had stepped in through Phoenix Holdings to save the project. Clifford thought he was being rescued by mysterious benefactors who recognized his brilliance. In reality, he was being saved by the man he loved to humiliate, and every square foot of that 50-story tower was a testament to Daniel's hidden empire. Now, standing on the Green family terrace after another evening of barely concealed contempt, Daniel felt the weight of his secret life pressing down on him. He had the power to destroy Clifford Green with a phone call. He could reveal that Phoenix Holdings owned significant stakes in most of Green Construction's major projects. He could demonstrate that the self-made patriarch of the Green family had actually been dancing to the tune of the son-in-law he despised. But power without purpose was just destruction, and Daniel wasn't interested in mindless revenge. He wanted justice. He wanted recognition. And most importantly, he wanted to show Rebecca's family exactly what kind of man they had been so eager to dismiss. The plan that had been forming in his mind for months was complex, risky, and absolutely perfect. It would require patience, precision, and perfect timing. But when it was over, Clifford Green would understand that respect wasn't something you were born into, it was something you earned. As Daniel rejoined the party, he caught Clifford's eye across the room. The older man was holding court again, regaling his audience with stories of his latest business triumphs. Daniel smiled and raised his glass in a silent toast. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts, he thought, because very soon, the whole world is going to know exactly who's been pulling the strings. Chapter 3. The Revelation. The birthday dinner was held in the Green family's formal dining room, a cathedral of mahogany and crystal that could have comfortably seated 20 people. Tonight, it hosted 12 carefully selected guests arranged around an antique table that had supposedly been in the Green family for generations, though Daniel happened to know Clifford had bought it at an estate sale 3 years ago. Daniel found himself seated at the far end of the table from Clifford, a deliberate slight that placed him in what Gloria Green undoubtedly considered the children's section, along with Alan and Rebecca's cousin Sarah. The seating arrangement was another small humiliation, designed to remind him of his place in the family hierarchy. Dinner conversation flowed around topics carefully chosen to exclude Daniel. Yacht club politics, charity galas he wasn't invited to, business deals involving people he supposedly didn't know. Daniel played his part perfectly, making appropriate noises when addressed directly while internally cataloging every slight and condescension. "Did you hear about the Westbridge development?" asked Charles Hartwell, one of Clifford's longtime business partners. The whole project nearly collapsed when the original investors pulled out. Lucky thing Phoenix Holdings stepped in at the last minute. Clifford nodded gravely. Anonymous investors can be a blessing or a curse in this business. In this case, they saved a lot of jobs and kept a good project moving forward. Though I have to say, their terms were surprisingly favorable. Almost like they knew something the rest of U.S. didn't. Daniel's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Phoenix Holdings had indeed structured the Westbridge deal with unusually generous terms for the contractors, specifically because Daniel had known Clifford's company would be bidding on the construction contract. Speaking of favorable terms, Gloria interjected with a meaningful look at Rebecca. Some people certainly have a talent for landing in situations that benefit them. The comment was ostensibly about the mysterious investors, but the poison in Gloria's voice made it clear she was really talking about Daniel. Rebecca's cheeks flushed red, and her grip tightened on her wine glass. "Mother," Rebecca warned, her voice low and dangerous. "What?" "I'm simply making an observation about business practices. Surely that's allowed in polite company." Daniel set down his fork and met Gloria's gaze directly. "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Green. It's fascinating how some people seem to benefit from circumstances they never saw coming, while others work very hard to create their own opportunities." The subtle emphasis on create wasn't lost on Clifford, whose eyes narrowed slightly. But before he could respond, Alan jumped into the conversation with his usual tactlessness. Speaking of creating opportunities, Alan said with a laugh that was slightly too loud, "I've been meaning to ask you, Dan, how exactly did you manage to afford that house you and Rebecca bought? I mean, construction supervisors don't usually live in Maple Heights, do they?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Rebecca's face went white with embarrassment and anger, while Clifford leaned back in his chair with the expression of a man enjoying an entertaining show. "Alan," Rebecca hissed, "that's completely inappropriate. Is it? I'm just curious about my brother-in-law's financial acumen. After all, real estate in Maple Heights runs what? For 100,000? 5? That's a lot of money for someone in the construction business." Daniel had been preparing for this question for 2 years. His answer was smooth and completely believable. "Smart investing," he said calmly. "I bought some properties downtown before the transit development was announced. Got lucky with the timing." "Lucky," Clifford repeated, his voice thoughtful, "or well-informed. It's amazing how often luck favors people who happen to know the right information at the right time." There was an undercurrent in Clifford's voice that made Daniel's instincts prickle. Was the old man starting to suspect something? Or was he simply fishing for weaknesses to exploit? "Information is only valuable if you know how to use it," Daniel replied. "Some people see opportunities everywhere, but never act on them. Others recognize a good deal and have the courage to commit." "Courage," Gloria laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Is that what we're calling it now?" "Mother," Rebecca's voice cracked like a whip. "That's enough. Daniel is my husband, and I won't sit here and listen to you insult him." "Nobody's insulting anyone, dear," Gloria said with false sweetness. "We're simply having a conversation about business and opportunity." "Are we?" Rebecca stood up, her napkin falling to the floor. "Because it sounds like you're questioning my husband's integrity at Dad's birthday dinner." The room fell silent, except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. All eyes were on Rebecca, who stood trembling with anger and embarrassment. Daniel could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, and something inside him snapped. For 3 years, he had endured their condescension. For 3 years, he had swallowed his pride and played the role of the grateful son-in-law who was lucky to be included in their world. For 3 years, he had watched them hurt the woman he loved with their casual cruelty and entitled arrogance. No more. Daniel stood slowly, his movement drawing every eye in the room. When he spoke, his voice was calm, controlled, and absolutely certain. "You want to know about information and opportunity, Clifford? Let me tell you a story." Clifford's eyebrows rose slightly, but he gestured for Daniel to continue. The rest of the table watched in fascination as the evening's entertainment took an unexpected turn. 3 years ago, I was exactly what you thought I was, a construction supervisor with dirt under his fingernails and big dreams. But unlike some people in this room, I didn't wait for opportunities to be handed to me. I created them. Daniel's voice grew stronger with each word. 3 years of suppressed anger and hidden truth finally finding its voice. I studied market trends. I analyzed development patterns. I identified undervalued properties and had the courage to invest my own money, not Daddy's trust fund. And when those investments paid off, I reinvested the profits into bigger opportunities. "How inspiring," Alan said with a smirk, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "It was," Daniel agreed, "especially when I realized I could use my success to help other people. So I created an investment vehicle, a way to fund projects that deserve backing. Projects that would benefit skilled contractors and create jobs for hardworking people." Clifford was leaning forward now, his full attention focused on Daniel. Something in the air had changed, and the older man's predatory instincts were starting to sense danger. "What kind of investment vehicle?" Clifford asked carefully. Daniel smiled, and for the first time all evening, it was completely genuine. "An anonymous holding company. The kind that prefers to work behind the scenes, supporting good projects without seeking publicity or credit." The silence stretched out for long seconds. Daniel could see the wheels turning in Clifford's mind, connections being made, possibilities being considered and discarded. "Anonymous," Clifford repeated slowly. "Completely anonymous. Phoenix Holdings, to be specific. The reaction was everything Daniel had hoped for and more. Clifford's face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, understanding, and finally, pure shock. The Scotch glass in his hand trembled slightly as the full implications hit him. Phoenix Holdings, Charles Hartwell said from across the table. But that's the group that's been backing all our major projects. That's impossible, Alan laughed, but his laugh sounded hollow and uncertain. Dan's a construction supervisor. No, Daniel said quietly, his eyes locked on Clifford's pale face. I'm a majority owner of Phoenix Holdings. I'm the anonymous investor who's been financing green construction's biggest contracts for the past 2 years. Every success story you've told tonight, every deal you've celebrated, every project you've used to demonstrate your business brilliance, I made them possible. The room erupted in chaos. Gloria's wine glass hit the floor with a crash. Alan started sputtering protests and questions. Rebecca stared at her husband with a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. But Daniel only had eyes for Clifford Green, watching his 3 years of carefully constructed superiority crumbled in real time. You wanted to toast success and failure, Daniel continued, his voice cutting through the noise. So let me propose a different toast. To the broke loser who's been pulling the strings of your empire while you've been taking credit for his work. Clifford finally found his voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. That's impossible. Is it? Phoenix Holdings owns 40% of the Meridian Tower project, 60% of Westbridge, 35% of the Riverside renovation. Should I continue, or would you like to check with your lawyers first? The old man's face had gone from pale to ashen, and Daniel realized with crystal clarity that this moment, this single, perfect moment of revelation, was worth every second of the humiliation he'd endured. Happy birthday, Clifford, Daniel said, raising his water glass in a mock toast. May this year bring you the recognition you truly deserve. As chaos continued to swirl around the dining room, Daniel felt Rebecca's hand slip into his. When he looked at her, he saw wonder instead of anger, pride instead of embarrassment. My God, she whispered, you really did it. You beat them at their own game. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. We're just getting started. Chapter 4, Aftershocks. The drive home from the Green Mansion was conducted in complete silence. Rebecca sat in the passenger seat of their Mercedes, a car that suddenly made perfect sense, staring straight ahead as Daniel navigated the familiar streets. The silence wasn't hostile. It was the heavy quiet of a woman whose entire understanding of her life had just been rewritten. When they pulled into their driveway, Rebecca finally spoke. How long? 3 years, Daniel answered, turning off the engine. Since about 6 months after we moved in together. The downtown properties. That was real. Completely real. And it was just the beginning. Rebecca nodded slowly, processing this information. Phoenix Holdings. I've seen that name in the business section of the paper. Probably. We've been fairly active in the local market. She turned to look at him directly. How big is this, Daniel? How much are we talking about? Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been dreading for 3 years. About $80 million. Give or take. Rebecca's hand went to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. 80 million? As of last month's valuation, yes. She was quiet for a long time, staring at their house. Their beautiful, understated house that represented maybe 1% of their actual wealth. Finally, she laughed, a sound somewhere between hysteria and amazement. I've been clipping coupons, she said. I've been shopping sales and worrying about our credit card balance. And you're worth $80 million. We're worth $80 million, Daniel corrected gently. And I've been clipping coupons too. I didn't want to change our life until tonight. Why tonight? Why tell them now? Daniel's jaw tightened as he remembered Clifford's toast, Alan's pointed questions, Gloria's casual cruelty. Because I was tired of watching them hurt you. Because 3 years of their condescension was enough. Because your father needed to learn that respect isn't inherited. Rebecca was quiet again, and Daniel found himself holding his breath. How did you apologize for hiding something this enormous? How did you explain 3 years of lies, even lies told with good intentions? Are you angry? He asked finally. Rebecca considered the question seriously. I should be. You lied to me for 3 years about something pretty fundamental. You let me worry about money while sitting on a fortune. You made major life decisions without consulting me. Daniel's heart sank. He'd known this moment would come, but he hadn't prepared for how much it would hurt to hear his failures laid out so clearly. But, Rebecca continued, you also protected me. You endured 3 years of abuse from my family to build something incredible. And when you finally revealed the truth, it was to defend me. She reached over and took his hand. I'm not angry, Daniel. I'm amazed. And I'm proud. And I'm a little terrified of what happens next. Daniel squeezed her hand, relief flooding through him. What happens next is up to you. We can disappear tomorrow, buy a house in the mountains, and never see your family again. Or we can stay and show them exactly who they've been dealing with. What do you want to do? Daniel's smile was sharp and dangerous. I want to finish what I started tonight. Your father has spent 3 years treating me like a charity case he was forced to tolerate. I think it's time he learned the cost of that arrogance. Rebecca studied his face in the dim light from their porch. This isn't just about money, is it? This is about revenge. Justice, Daniel corrected. There's a difference. Is there? What exactly are you planning? Daniel was quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts. The plan that had been forming in his mind for months was complex and far-reaching, but it all came down to one simple concept, showing Clifford Green exactly how precarious his empire really was. Phoenix Holdings doesn't just invest in projects, he said finally. We've been systematically acquiring strategic assets throughout the region. Properties, businesses, partnerships. We've been building leverage. Leverage for what? To demonstrate that success isn't about who your father was or where you went to school. It's about vision, courage, and the willingness to do what others won't. Your father has built his reputation on taking credit for other people's work. It's time someone called him on it. Rebecca was quiet for a long time, staring at their house. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. My father isn't going to just accept this, you know? He's going to fight back. He's going to try to destroy you, to find some way to prove you're not legitimate. Let him try, Daniel said. Every contract Phoenix Holdings has signed is legally bulletproof. Every investment we've made is completely transparent to regulators. Every dollar we've earned is documented and taxed appropriately. Your father can investigate me all he wants. All he'll find is a very successful businessman who happens to be married to his daughter. And my mother? Alan? They're going to make our lives miserable. Daniel turned to face her fully. Becca, I need you to understand something. This isn't about making them miserable. This is about showing them the truth. For 3 years, they've treated me like I was beneath them, like I was lucky to be included in their world. Tonight, they learned that I haven't been lucky. I've been generous. Generous. Every major contract green construction has landed in the past 2 years has been possible because of Phoenix Holdings' backing. The Meridian Tower, Westbridge, Riverside, none of those projects would have happened without my investment. Your father's brilliant business acumen has actually been my financial support. The implications of this hit Rebecca like a physical blow. You mean Dad's success is largely due to the son-in-law he loves to humiliate? Yes. Rebecca was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and uncertain. What happens to his business if you pull your support? Daniel's expression was unreadable. Green Construction has several ongoing projects that depend on Phoenix Holdings financing. If that support were to disappear suddenly, it would create significant challenges. You could destroy him. I could, but that's not the goal. The goal is recognition, respect, and maybe, just maybe, an apology for 3 years of treating us like we were beneath them. Rebecca nodded slowly. She understood the game now, and she understood the stakes. Her husband wasn't just rich, he was powerful. And power in the hands of someone who'd been systematically humiliated was a dangerous thing. What do you need me to do? She asked. Daniel looked at her with surprise and gratitude. After 3 years of hiding his true self, having Rebecca as an ally instead of another person to protect felt like a weight lifting from his shoulders. Right now, nothing. Tomorrow, your father is going to start making phone calls. He's going to want to verify what I told him tonight. He's going to investigate Phoenix Holdings and try to find some way to discredit me. Let him. Every call he makes, every investigation he launches, is just going to confirm that everything I told him was true. And then we wait. Because very soon, Clifford Green is going to realize that the broke loser he's been dismissing for 3 years is actually the most important business partner he's ever had. And when that happens, we'll see exactly how much his principles are worth. As they walked into their house, their beautiful, carefully understated house that represented a fraction of their actual wealth, Daniel felt a sense of completion he hadn't experienced in years. The secret was out. The game had begun. And for the first time in 3 years, he was playing it on his own terms. Tomorrow would bring phone calls, investigations, and probably a family crisis unlike anything the Greens had ever experienced. But tonight, Daniel Smith was finally free to be exactly who he'd always been, a man who created his own opportunities and never backed down from a fight. The only question now was whether Clifford Green was smart enough to recognize when he'd been outmaneuvered or proud enough to destroy himself rather than admit he'd been wrong. Chapter 5. The Investigation. Clifford Green's investigation began before the sun rose the next morning. By 6 a.m., he was in his home office, surrounded by legal documents and financial reports, making phone calls to lawyers, accountants, and private investigators. If Daniel Smith really was behind Phoenix Holdings, Clifford intended to find proof, and more importantly, find a weakness he could exploit. His first call was to Marcus Webb, his longtime attorney and one of the few people who knew all of Green Construction's financial arrangements. Marcus, I need you to pull every contract, every financial agreement, every piece of paper we've signed with Phoenix Holdings for the past 2 years, Clifford barked into the phone. Clifford, it's 6 a.m. What's this about? Just do it. And I want you to research the ownership structure of Phoenix Holdings. I want to know who's behind it, where their money comes from, and whether there's anything irregular about their business practices. Is there a problem with the relationship? They've been our most reliable financial partner. Clifford's jaw clenched. Just do the research, Marcus, and do it quietly. The next call was to Helen Rodriguez, a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering financial irregularities. Clifford had used her services before when he suspected business partners of hiding assets or misrepresenting their positions. Helen, I need a complete financial investigation of Phoenix Holdings and its ownership structure. Money flow, asset origins, regulatory compliance, everything. That's going to be expensive, Clifford, and time-consuming. Phoenix Holdings is incorporated in Delaware with multiple shell companies. It could take weeks to unravel their structure. I don't care what it costs. I need answers. By 8 a.m., Clifford had initiated investigations through 3 different channels and put his best people on the task of verifying Daniel's claims. If his son-in-law was lying, Clifford would expose him. If he was telling the truth, well, Clifford wasn't ready to consider that possibility yet. The call he'd been dreading came at 9:15 a.m. Rebecca's voice was cold and formal when she spoke. Dad, we need to talk. Rebecca, I'm sure last night was confusing for everyone. Why don't you and Daniel come by this evening, and we could discuss this like civilized people? No, Dad. You don't get to dismiss this like it was some kind of misunderstanding. Daniel told you the truth last night, and instead of apologizing for 3 years of treating him like garbage, you're spending your morning trying to investigate him. Clifford's blood pressure spiked. How did she know about the investigations? I'm simply verifying some rather extraordinary claims, Rebecca. Surely you can understand the need for due diligence. Due diligence? Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Is that what you call it when you question my husband's integrity? Your husband made some very serious claims last night. Claims that, if true, would fundamentally change the nature of our business relationship. They're true, Dad. And the fact that your first response is to investigate rather than apologize tells me everything I need to know about your character. The line went dead, leaving Clifford staring at his phone in frustration. His daughter was choosing sides, and she wasn't choosing his. The first concrete evidence came at 11 a.m. when Marcus Webb called back with preliminary findings. Clifford, I've reviewed our Phoenix Holdings contracts, and there's something you need to know. The terms we've been getting are extraordinarily favorable. Below-market interest rates, flexible repayment schedules, minimal oversight requirements. These aren't standard commercial lending terms. What are you saying? I'm saying whoever's behind Phoenix Holdings has been treating us like family rather than clients. The Meridian Tower financing alone saved us approximately $8 million compared to what we would have paid with traditional lenders. Clifford felt the floor shifting beneath his feet. $8 million. And that's just one project. Across all our Phoenix Holdings agreements, I estimate they've saved us somewhere between $20 and $30 million in financing costs over the past 2 years. The phone slipped from Clifford's nerveless fingers. $30 million. That was nearly half of Green Construction's total profit for the past 2 years. If Daniel really was behind Phoenix Holdings, then Clifford's business acumen was actually his son-in-law's financial generosity. The second blow came from Helen Rodriguez at 2 p.m. Clifford, I've got preliminary findings on Phoenix Holdings. The ownership structure is complex, but it's completely legal and properly documented. Shell companies incorporated in Delaware, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, trust structures in Switzerland. It's sophisticated financial engineering, but there's nothing irregular about it. Who's behind it? That's where it gets interesting. The beneficial ownership traces back to a single individual, and based on the incorporation dates and financial flows, this person has been building the structure for approximately 3 years. Who? Clifford's voice was barely a whisper. The paperwork is complex, but the ultimate beneficial owner appears to be Daniel Smith. The room spun around Clifford as the last piece of his denial crumbled. Daniel hadn't been lying. The construction supervisor he'd spent 3 years dismissing as a gold-digging failure was actually the financial genius who'd been propping up Green Construction's success. How much is he worth? Clifford asked, dreading the answer. Conservative estimate? $80 to $90 million. Possibly more if you factor in the real estate portfolio and private equity investments. Clifford hung up the phone and sat in stunned silence. $80 to $90 million. His son-in-law was worth more than Clifford had accumulated in 40 years of building Green Construction. The final confirmation came from James Morrison, his golf buddy who worked in commercial real estate. Cliff, you asked me to check around about Phoenix Holdings. They're legitimate, all right. Big players in the regional market. Word is they're backed by some kind of financial genius who's been making brilliant investments for the past few years. Any idea who's behind them? Nobody knows for sure. But there are rumors. Some people think it's a tech billionaire looking to diversify. Others think it's old money staying anonymous for tax reasons. Whoever it is, they've got serious financial skills and deep pockets. Clifford almost laughed at the irony. The financial genius everyone was speculating about was sitting at his dinner table every month, enduring lectures about success and hard work from a man who'd been unknowingly benefiting from his expertise. As the afternoon wore on, more details emerged. Phoenix Holdings had investments in 17 different regional projects. They held significant real estate positions throughout the tri-state area. They'd structured complex financial deals that had saved their partners millions of dollars while generating substantial returns. And at the center of it all was Daniel Smith, the man Clifford had dismissed as a loser who'd gotten lucky by marrying into the Green family. By 5 p.m., Clifford was forced to confront the crushing reality of his situation. Not only was Daniel telling the truth about Phoenix Holdings, but Green Construction's recent success was largely dependent on his son-in-law's continued financial support. The Meridian Tower project, which Clifford had been touting as the crown jewel of his career, would collapse without Phoenix Holdings' backing. The Westbridge development that was supposed to cement his legacy was entirely dependent on Daniel's investment. 3 of Green Construction's 5 major current projects existed solely because the man Clifford had been humiliating for 3 years had chosen to support them. The phone rang at 5:30 p.m. Clifford looked at the caller ID and saw Daniel's name. His hand trembled slightly as he answered. Daniel, Clifford, I assume you've had a productive day confirming what I told you last night. Clifford's pride warred with the crushing weight of reality. The investigations are ongoing. No, they're not. You've called Marcus Webb, Helen Rodriguez, and at least 2 other firms. You've confirmed that Phoenix Holdings is legitimate, that I'm the beneficial owner, and that your business has been dependent on my financial support for the past 2 years. The casual way Daniel recited the information made it clear he'd been monitoring Clifford's investigation efforts. Another demonstration of power that Clifford was just beginning to understand. What do you want? Clifford asked, his voice hoarse. Right now, I want you to think very carefully about what kind of man spends 3 years dismissing someone as a failure, then spends an entire day trying to prove that person is lying when they reveal their success. Daniel, I want you to think about what kind of father-in-law makes his daughter choose between her family and her husband. And I want you to think about what kind of business partner bites the hand that's been feeding him for 2 years. The line went dead, leaving Clifford alone with the wreckage of his assumptions and the dawning realization that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Daniel Smith wasn't just rich. He was the puppet master who'd been controlling Clifford's fate for years. And now, for the first time in their relationship, Daniel was pulling the strings with Clifford's full knowledge. The game had changed completely, and Clifford was just beginning to understand how badly he'd been outplayed. Chapter 6, The Squeeze. 3 days after the birthday dinner revelation, Clifford Green sat in his office, staring at a stack of contracts that suddenly read like his own death warrant. Every page reminded him of his dependence on Phoenix Holdings, every signature a testament to how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered by the son-in-law he'd spent 3 years undermining. The knock on his door came at precisely 10 a.m. His secretary announced that Daniel Smith was here to see him, and despite every instinct screaming at him to refuse the meeting, Clifford found himself saying, "Send him in." Daniel entered the office with the quiet confidence of a man who owned the room. Gone was any pretense of deference or discomfort. This was Daniel Smith, majority owner of Phoenix Holdings, and his presence filled the space like a physical force. "Clifford," Daniel said, settling into the chair across from the desk without being invited. "Thank you for seeing me. Did I have a choice?" Daniel's smile was razor sharp. There's always a choice. That's what I've learned about business. Every decision creates opportunities and consequences. Clifford leaned back in his chair, studying the man he thought he knew. 3 days of investigation had revealed the scope of his miscalculation, but sitting across from Daniel now, he was beginning to understand the depth of it. "What do you want?" Clifford asked. "To discuss our partnership. Phoenix Holdings has been very satisfied with Green Construction's performance on our joint projects. Your teams are skilled, your project management is solid, and your reputation in the industry is excellent." The professional tone was somehow more unsettling than outright hostility would have been. Daniel was speaking to him as an equal, no, as a superior addressing a valued but subordinate partner. "However," Daniel continued, "recent events have raised some concerns about the long-term viability of our relationship." "What concerns?" Daniel reached into his briefcase and withdrew a tablet, which he turned toward Clifford. The screen showed a financial summary that made Clifford's blood run cold. Green Construction currently has $47 million in outstanding obligations tied to Phoenix Holdings financing. The Meridian Tower project alone represents $23 million in leveraged debt that becomes immediately due if Phoenix Holdings withdraws its backing. Clifford stared at the numbers, each one a nail in his coffin. "You're threatening me." "I'm explaining the situation. You've built Green Construction's recent expansion on the foundation of Phoenix Holdings support. That foundation is solid as long as our partnership remains mutually beneficial." "Mutually beneficial," Clifford repeated. "What does that mean?" Daniel's expression remained perfectly neutral. "It means treating your partners with the respect they deserve. It means recognizing contributions rather than taking credit for others' work. It means understanding that success is a collaborative effort. You want an apology. I want recognition. For 3 years, you've told anyone who would listen about your business acumen, your market insight, your ability to secure favorable financing for major projects. But those favorable terms weren't the result of your negotiating skills, Clifford. They were gifts from a family member you were simultaneously humiliating. The words hit Clifford like physical blows. Every boast, every moment of pride, every story he'd told about his business brilliance, all of it had been built on a foundation of Daniel's generosity and his own ignorance. "What do you want me to do?" Clifford asked, the question coming out strangled. "I want you to make a choice. You can continue operating under the assumption that I'm a threat to be eliminated, in which case our business relationship will be terminated and you can explain to your employees why half your projects are suddenly unfunded. Or you can accept that the man you've been dismissing as a failure is actually your most important business partner." Daniel stood up, his movement fluid and controlled. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, Phoenix Holdings will be reevaluating all of its regional partnerships." "Daniel, wait." Clifford's voice cracked with desperation. "You're talking about destroying my company. 40 years of work, hundreds of employees, dozens of families who depend on green construction for their livelihoods." Daniel paused at the door, his hand on the handle. When he turned back, his expression was cold and implacable. "3 days ago, you stood in front of 12 people and called me a broke loser who succeeded by marrying your daughter. You humiliated Rebecca in front of your friends and family. You spent 3 years treating me like a charity case while secretly benefiting from my financial support." Daniel stepped closer, and for the first time, Clifford saw the rage that had been simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Now you want to talk about families and livelihoods? Where was that concern when you were destroying your daughter's marriage for sport? Where was that consideration when you were undermining the man who was keeping your business afloat?" "I didn't know. You didn't want to know. You were so committed to the narrative of my failure that you never bothered to look beneath the surface." "Well, congratulations, Clifford. You've finally seen what's beneath the surface. The question now is what you plan to do about it." Daniel left without another word, leaving Clifford alone with the contracts, the financial statements, and the crushing weight of his own short-sightedness. Within an hour, the crisis deepened. Marcus Webb called with devastating news. "Clifford, I've been reviewing our loan agreements with Phoenix Holdings, and there's something you need to know. Most of our contracts have acceleration clauses triggered by material changes in the business relationship." "What does that mean?" "It means if Phoenix Holdings determines that our partnership is no longer viable, they can demand immediate repayment of all outstanding obligations. We're talking about $47 million, due within 30 days. Clifford's vision blurred. $47 million in 30 days would bankrupt green construction immediately. There was no way to raise that kind of capital in such a short time frame. "Can we fight it? Challenge the clauses." "The contracts are ironclad, Clifford. Whoever structured these deals knew exactly what they were doing. We signed these agreements voluntarily, and the terms are completely enforceable." The second call came from his project manager at the Meridian Tower site. "Mr. Green, we've got a problem. Phoenix Holdings sent a financial audit team to the site this morning. They're reviewing all our cost projections and timeline estimates. They're also asking questions about our management structure and decision-making processes." "What kind of questions?" "They want to know who's really in charge of the project, who makes the key decisions, and whether green construction has the management capability to complete the project on schedule." Clifford understood the message. Phoenix Holdings was conducting due diligence for a potential partnership termination. They were building a case for withdrawing their support and demanding immediate repayment of their investment. By the end of the day, the squeeze was complete. Daniel had demonstrated with surgical precision exactly how dependent green construction had become on Phoenix Holdings support. Every major project, every expansion plan, every aspect of the company's future was tied to the continued partnership with a man Clifford had spent 3 years trying to diminish. The irony was crushing. In his effort to prove Daniel was a failure, Clifford had inadvertently revealed the extent of his own dependence on Daniel's success. The puppet master had finally shown his strings, and Clifford was dangling helplessly from every one of them. That evening, Clifford sat in his study with a glass of scotch and a stack of financial projections that all led to the same conclusion. Without Phoenix Holdings, green construction would be bankrupt within 6 months. Daniel Smith had spent 3 years building an empire while pretending to be a simple construction supervisor. He'd structured their business relationship to create maximum leverage while maintaining complete legal protection. And he'd done it all while enduring Clifford's contempt with the patience of a man who knew exactly how the game would end. For the first time in 40 years, Clifford Green had been completely, utterly, and brilliantly outmaneuvered. The question now was whether his pride would allow him to admit it before Daniel's patience ran out entirely. Chapter 7. The Alliance. Rebecca Green Smith stood at the window of her father's study, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She'd been awake all night, thinking about family, loyalty, and the impossible choice her father was forcing her to make. Behind her, Clifford sat slumped in his leather chair, looking older than his 65 years. The past week had aged him visibly. His silver hair seemed grayer, his commanding presence diminished by the weight of his miscalculations. "He's going to destroy me," Clifford said quietly. "Your husband is going to wipe out 40 years of work because of some dinner party comments." Rebecca turned from the window, her expression hard. "Is that really what you think this is about? Dinner party comments?" "Rebecca, I know I said some things. You called him a broke loser, Dad, in front of our family and friends. You spent 3 years treating him like he was lucky to breathe the same air as us. And when he finally showed you who he really was, your first instinct was to investigate him like a criminal." Clifford's shoulders sagged. "I was protecting the family business." "No, you were protecting your ego. There's a difference." The silence stretched between them, heavy with 3 years of accumulated resentment and pain. Finally, Rebecca sat down across from her father, her voice softer but no less determined. "Dad, I need you to understand something. Daniel didn't build Phoenix Holdings to hurt you. He built it to prove himself worthy of me. Every investment, every deal, every success, it was all about earning the respect you refused to give him. I didn't know, because you didn't want to know. You decided he was a failure the day we got engaged, and nothing was going to change your mind. Not his work ethic, not his intelligence, not the way he loved me. You chose to see him as a threat instead of an opportunity." Clifford looked up at his daughter, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in years. The little girl who had hung on his every word was gone, replaced by a strong woman who had made her choice and was prepared to live with the consequences. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to swallow your pride and acknowledge what Daniel has accomplished. I want you to apologize for 3 years of treating him like garbage. And I want you to figure out how to make this right before you lose everything you've worked for. And if I can't, if my pride won't let me." Rebecca's expression was sad but resolute. "Then you'll lose your daughter along with your business. Because I'm done choosing between my husband and my family. Daniel has shown me what loyalty looks like, and it's time I showed him the same." Before Clifford could respond, the study door opened and Gloria Green entered, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Rebecca, I need to speak with you. Privately. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Dad." Gloria's composure cracked slightly. "This nonsense has gone far enough. Your husband has obviously been planning this humiliation for years. He's manipulated our family, our business relationships, our entire social circle. And you're just going to stand by and let him destroy us." "Manipulated?" Rebecca's voice rose dangerously. "Mom, Daniel invested his own money to help Dad's business succeed. He structured deals that saved us millions of dollars. He supported our family financially while you treated him like a servant. How exactly is that manipulation? He lied to you for 3 years about who he really was. He protected himself from 3 years of your judgment and condescension. There's a difference." Gloria turned to Clifford, her voice shrill with panic. "Are you going to let her talk to me this way? Are you going to let that man destroy everything we've built?" Clifford looked at his wife, seeing her clearly for the first time as well. Gloria's outrage wasn't about family or loyalty. It was about losing the social status that came with being the successful businessman's wife. She was more concerned about explaining Daniel's success to her country club friends than about understanding how wrong they'd all been. "Daniel didn't build Phoenix Holdings to destroy us," Clifford said quietly. "He built it to spite us. Every deal he made, every dollar he invested, it was proof that we were wrong about him." "Clifford." "No, Gloria. We were wrong. I was wrong. I spent 3 years trying to make him feel small because I was threatened by his potential. And instead of recognizing his intelligence and drive, I dismissed him as a gold digger who got lucky. Rebecca stared at her father in surprise. This was the first time she'd heard him acknowledge any responsibility for the family's treatment of Daniel. "It's not too late," she said softly. "Daniel doesn't want to destroy the business. He wants to be acknowledged for what he's contributed. He wants the respect he's earned. And if I give him that respect, if I acknowledge his contributions publicly, then maybe we can find a way forward that doesn't involve destroying everything." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Alan Green, who burst into the study without knocking. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his face pale with panic. "Dad, we have a problem. A big problem." "What now?" "I've been doing some research on Phoenix Holdings, trying to understand the scope of Daniel's investments. It's worse than we thought." Alan pulled out his laptop and opened a series of financial documents. "Phoenix Holdings doesn't just have investments in our projects. They own significant stakes in half the major development projects in the region. The Westfield Shopping Complex, the Harbor District renovation, the University Expansion Project. Daniel has his fingers in everything." Clifford stared at the screen, the numbers blurring together into a portrait of power and influence he'd never imagined. "How much influence are we talking about?" Rebecca asked. "Conservative estimate? Phoenix Holdings controls about 12% of the regional commercial development market. They're not just investors, they're kingmakers." The implications hit Clifford like a physical blow. Daniel wasn't just threatening green construction. He had the power to influence their relationships with suppliers, subcontractors, and other developers. A word from Phoenix Holdings could blacklist green construction from half the major projects in the tri-state area. "There's more," Alan continued, his voice hollow. "I talked to some contacts in the industry. Phoenix Holdings has been quietly acquiring properties adjacent to our major projects. If they wanted to, they could create zoning challenges, environmental issues, or access problems that would kill our developments." "You're saying he could destroy us without even calling in our loans," Clifford said. "I'm saying he could destroy the entire regional construction industry if he wanted to. He's not just rich, Dad. He's powerful." The room fell silent as the full scope of Daniel's position became clear. This wasn't just about family dynamics or personal respect. Daniel Smith had built himself into one of the most influential figures in the regional economy, and he'd done it while pretending to be a simple construction supervisor. "The question," Rebecca said quietly, "is what are we going to do about it?" Clifford looked at his daughter, his wife, and his son, seeing his family clearly for the first time in years. They were faced with a choice that would define not just their business, but their relationships with each other and with the man who had become the most important person in their economic ecosystem. "I'm going to call Daniel," Clifford said finally, "and I'm going to ask him to come here so we can have a conversation like adults. And then," Clifford's expression was grim but determined, "then I'm going to do something I should have done 3 years ago. I'm going to listen to what he has to say." As Clifford reached for his phone, he couldn't help but marvel at the complexity of the trap Daniel had built around them. It wasn't just financial leverage or business pressure. Daniel had created a situation where the only path forward required Clifford to acknowledge everything he'd been too proud to admit. It was, Clifford had to admit, a masterpiece of strategic thinking, and it had been executed by the man he'd dismissed as a failure. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Daniel arrived at the Green Mansion at exactly 2 p.m., dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that Rebecca had never seen before. Everything about his appearance had changed since the revelation. His posture straighter, his movements more confident, his entire demeanor radiating the quiet authority of a man who no longer needed to hide his true nature. Rebecca met him at the door, studying his face for any sign of the gentle man she'd married. He was still there, she realized, but wrapped in a layer of steel that 3 years of humiliation had forged. "How do you want to play this?" she asked quietly. "Honestly," Daniel replied, "for the first time in 3 years, I'm going to be completely honest about who I am and what I want." They found the Green family assembled in the living room like defendants awaiting sentencing. Clifford sat rigidly in his favorite chair, while Gloria perched on the edge of the sofa as if ready to flee. Alan stood by the window, his usual smirk replaced by nervous tension. Daniel took the chair directly opposite Clifford, a deliberate choice that established them as equals facing each other across a negotiating table. "Clifford," Daniel began, his voice calm and professional, "I appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about our relationship." "Our relationship?" Gloria interjected sharply. "You mean your systematic deception of this family?" Daniel turned to her with the patience of a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. "Mrs. Green, for 3 years you've made it clear that you consider me an unsuitable husband for your daughter. You've questioned my finances, my background, my worthiness to be part of your family. Now you've learned that I'm worth approximately $90 million and control a significant portion of the regional development market. Has that changed your opinion of my suitability?" Gloria's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, and Daniel nodded as if she'd answered. "That's what I thought. Your objection was never about my character or my treatment of Rebecca. It was about class and money. Well, now I have more money than your family ever has. So where does that leave your objections?" He turned back to Clifford before Gloria could formulate a response. "You, on the other hand, have different concerns. You're worried about your business, your legacy, and your reputation. Those are practical concerns that we can address practically." Clifford leaned forward slightly. "What are you proposing?" "A new understanding. For 3 years, I've been your silent partner, providing the financial backing that made your recent success possible. I did it anonymously because I wanted to prove myself without trading on my wealth. I did it generously because I hoped to earn your respect through my contributions rather than my bank account." Daniel's voice hardened. "That was naive of me. I thought merit would eventually be recognized, that competence would speak for itself. Instead, you used my anonymity as license to treat me with contempt while taking credit for achievements that were only possible because of my support." "Daniel," Clifford began, but Daniel held up a hand. "I'm not finished. The Meridian Tower project that you've been calling the crown jewel of your career? Phoenix Holdings provided 60% of the financing and took below-market returns to make it possible. The Westbridge development that's supposed to secure your legacy? We structured the deal to give green construction preferential terms that saved you $12 million. The Riverside renovation that you used as proof of your market insight? I bought the surrounding properties 6 months before you bid on the project and leased them back to the city at cost to ensure your proposal would be competitive." Each revelation hit Clifford like a physical blow. Rebecca watched her father's face as 3 years of celebrated business victories were revealed to be the product of Daniel's strategic support. "In other words," Daniel continued, "your recent success isn't the result of your business acumen. It's the result of my financial backing and strategic planning. The question now is what happens next." Alan finally found his voice. "What do you want? Money? Public acknowledgement? An apology?" Daniel's smile was sharp and cold. "I want what I've always wanted. Respect. Recognition for my contributions. And an end to the treatment that has made family gatherings an exercise in humiliation for your sister. And if we give you that," Clifford asked carefully, "then Phoenix Holdings continues to be a reliable partner for green construction. We honor our existing contracts, we consider new opportunities for collaboration, and we build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than hidden dependency. And if we don't," Daniel's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Then you'll discover how quickly success can disappear when it's built on someone else's foundation." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder, which he placed on the coffee table between them. "These are the termination clauses for every contract between Phoenix Holdings and Green Construction. If our partnership ends, you have 30 days to repay $47 million in outstanding obligations." Clifford stared at the folder as if it contained live explosives. "Additionally," Daniel continued, "Phoenix Holdings has acquisition rights on several properties adjacent to your major projects. We also have influence over zoning decisions, environmental approvals, and supplier relationships throughout the region. If we wanted to make your life difficult, we could do so without breaking any laws or violating any contracts." "You're threatening us," Gloria accused. I'm explaining your position, Daniel corrected. For 3 years, you've treated me as if I had no power, no influence, no value beyond whatever reflected glory I might gain from marrying into your family. Now you know the truth. I have more power than you ever imagined, and I've been using it to support you despite your treatment of me. He stood up, his movement fluid and controlled. The question isn't whether I'm threatening you. The question is whether you're intelligent enough to recognize when you've been outmaneuvered and adapt accordingly. Rebecca had been silent throughout the confrontation, watching her family confront the reality of Daniel's power. Now she spoke for the first time. Dad, he's offering you a partnership. A real partnership, based on honesty and mutual respect. That's more than you deserve after 3 years of treating him like garbage, but it's what he's offering. Clifford looked at his daughter, then at Daniel, then at the folder of contracts that represented the sword hanging over his empire. What kind of partnership? He asked finally. Phoenix Holdings becomes the acknowledged financial partner for Green Construction's major projects. I take a visible role in strategic planning and decision-making. We stop pretending that your success is independent of my support, and we start building something together instead of maintaining the fiction that you're doing me a favor by tolerating my presence. And personally, between us as family. Daniel's expression softened slightly, and for a moment Rebecca could see the man she'd married beneath the armor he'd been forced to build. Personally, I want to stop dreading family gatherings. I want my wife to stop having to choose between her husband and her family. I want to be treated like a person instead of a problem to be endured. The room fell silent as Clifford processed the offer. 3 years of humiliation and hidden resentment had led to this moment. The complete reversal of their power dynamic and the offer of a new beginning built on truth instead of deception. If I agree to this, Clifford said slowly, if I acknowledge your contributions and accept this partnership, what guarantee do I have that you won't use your leverage against me in the future? Daniel's smile was genuinely warm for the first time all afternoon. The same guarantee you've always had, Clifford. The guarantee that I love your daughter and want what's best for her. The difference is that now you know the price of treating her badly. Rebecca felt tears stinging her eyes as she realized what Daniel had really accomplished. He hadn't just built wealth and power. He'd built protection for their marriage and their future. Everything he'd done had been to ensure that no one could ever make her choose between love and family again. Clifford extended his hand across the space between their chairs. Partners. Daniel shook it firmly. Partners. As the two men sealed their agreement, Rebecca knew that everything was about to change. The family dynamics that had defined her life for 28 years were being rewritten in real time. And for the first time in 3 years, the man she loved was going to be treated with the respect he'd always deserved. The reckoning was complete, and Daniel Smith had won. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, Daniel Smith stood at the window of his new corner office in the Green Construction building, watching crews break ground on what would be the largest mixed-use development in the region's history. The brass nameplate on his door read, Daniel Smith, Strategic Development Director, but everyone in the building knew the real truth. He was the power behind Green Construction's transformation into a regional empire. The public announcement of Phoenix Holdings' partnership with Green Construction had sent shockwaves through the business community. Financial journalists scrambled to understand how a mysterious investment group had been quietly shaping the regional development market for 3 years. Industry competitors tried to decode the strategic advantage that had allowed Green Construction to secure such favorable financing terms. But for Daniel, the most satisfying changes were personal. Dad wants to know if you'll join him for lunch today, Rebecca said, entering his office with a smile that still made his heart skip. He's meeting with the mayor about the waterfront development project, and he wants your input on the financing structure. Daniel nodded, still marveling at how naturally the word Dad rolled off her tongue when referring to Clifford now. The past 6 months had seen a complete transformation in their family dynamics, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect that should have existed from the beginning. How's the university project coming along? Rebecca asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Ahead of schedule and under budget, Daniel replied with satisfaction. Phoenix Holdings' backing allowed us to negotiate better terms with suppliers, and our enhanced project management system is proving even more efficient than projected. It was a far cry from the secretive maneuvering that had characterized their early relationship. Now Daniel's role was open and acknowledged, his contributions visible and celebrated rather than hidden and dismissed. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Gloria Green had struggled to adjust to the new reality, her social circle buzzing with whispers about how the family had misjudged Daniel so completely. She'd eventually found her footing by reframing the narrative. Daniel wasn't a construction worker who'd gotten lucky. He was a brilliant financial strategist who'd chosen to work in construction to understand the industry from the ground up. Alan had been forced to confront his own assumptions about success and merit. The brother-in-law he'd dismissed as a charity case was now his boss in all but name, and Alan's entrepreneurial ventures looked even more frivolous when compared to Daniel's systematic empire building. But the most dramatic change had been in Clifford himself. The revelation of Daniel's true position had shattered Clifford's worldview in ways that went far beyond business. For 40 years, he believed that success was primarily about connections, heritage, and natural superiority. Daniel's rise forced him to confront the possibility that merit, intelligence, and strategic thinking might be more important than bloodlines and social position. The process had been humbling, but ultimately transformative. Clifford threw himself into understanding how Daniel had built Phoenix Holdings, studying his son-in-law's investment strategies with the intensity of a graduate student. What he discovered was a financial mind that operated on a level he'd never encountered. Someone who could see patterns and opportunities that remained invisible to conventional thinking. The quarterly Phoenix Holdings review is this afternoon, Daniel reminded Rebecca. Your father wants to discuss expanding our partnership to include commercial real estate development in addition to construction. Rebecca smiled. 6 months ago, he was trying to investigate whether you were embezzling money. Now he wants to expand your partnership. People can change when they're forced to confront new information, Daniel said diplomatically. Your father is an intelligent man. Once he understood the actual situation, he adapted accordingly. It was a generous interpretation of events that glossed over the months of resistance and grudging acceptance that had preceded Clifford's full embrace of their partnership. But Daniel had learned that successful relationships required focusing on forward momentum rather than past grievances. The door opened, and Clifford himself entered, carrying a stack of architectural plans and wearing the expression of a man with exciting news to share. Daniel, perfect. I just got off the phone with the City Planning Commission. They've approved our proposal for the Harbor District development. 18 months of negotiation, and we finally have the green light for the largest urban renewal project in the state's history. Daniel studied the plans, his mind already running calculations on financing structures, development timelines, and profit projections. The Harbor District project represented everything Phoenix Holdings had been building toward, a massive, complex development that would reshape the regional economy and cement their position as the dominant force in local commercial development. What's the total project value? Daniel asked. Conservative estimate? $400 million over 7 years. It's going to require coordination between municipal authorities, state environmental agencies, federal transportation departments, and about 50 different private contractors. In other words, Rebecca said with a grin, exactly the kind of impossible project that Phoenix Holdings specializes in making possible. Clifford's expression grew serious as he looked at Daniel. I want you to know, son, that 6 months ago I would have tried to handle this alone. I would have convinced myself that 40 years of experience was enough to manage a project this complex. I would have been wrong, and it would have destroyed us. The word son still sounded strange coming from Clifford, but Daniel appreciated the effort. More importantly, he appreciated the recognition of competence and partnership that the word represented. What do you need from Phoenix Holdings? Daniel asked. Everything. Financing, strategic planning, risk management, political coordination. The works. This project is too big for green construction to handle alone, but together we can build something that will define this region for the next generation. Daniel nodded, his mind already working through the challenges and opportunities the Harbor District represented. It would require every skill he'd developed over the past 3 years, every relationship Phoenix Holdings had cultivated, every strategic advantage they'd built. "I'll have a preliminary analysis ready by tomorrow," Daniel said. "But I can tell you right now that Phoenix Holdings is interested. This is exactly the kind of transformational project we've been positioning ourselves to support." As Clifford left with his plans and Rebecca returned to her own work, Daniel found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 3 years ago, he'd been a construction supervisor with big dreams and a secret plan. Today, he was the strategic partner in one of the region's most successful development companies, married to a woman who loved and respected him, and acknowledged as the financial genius who'd been quietly reshaping the local economy. The revenge he'd planned had evolved into something far more satisfying than simple retribution. Instead of destroying the Green family, he'd forced them to evolve, to confront their assumptions and prejudices, and ultimately to become better versions of themselves. Clifford Green was now a more thoughtful and strategic businessman, humbled by the recognition of his limitations, but energized by the possibilities of genuine partnership. Alan had been forced to develop actual skills instead of coasting on family connections. Even Gloria had found a new sense of purpose in helping to manage the social aspects of their expanded business relationships. And Rebecca had gained something she'd never had before: the confidence that came from knowing her husband could protect their family and their future from any challenge. The pride that came from being married to a man whose intelligence and capability commanded genuine respect. The security that came from knowing she would never again have to choose between love and family loyalty. As Daniel watched the sun set over the city he was helping to reshape, he thought about the toast Clifford had delivered 6 months ago at his birthday dinner. "To my daughter, who succeeded despite marrying a broke loser." Tonight, Clifford would probably offer a different toast entirely. Something about partnerships, about the importance of recognizing talent wherever it emerged, about the dangers of judging people by their circumstances rather than their capabilities. But Daniel's favorite toast would always be the one he delivered that night, the words that had changed everything, to the failure who turned out to be exactly what this family needed. The game was over, and everyone had one, even if some of them had needed to be dragged kicking and screaming to the victory party. Daniel Smith had spent 3 years building an empire while pretending to be someone else. Now, finally, he could be exactly who he'd always been, a man who created his own success and protected the people he loved, regardless of what anyone else thought he deserved. The future stretched ahead of them, full of projects to build, relationships to develop, and a legacy to create together. And for the first time since his wedding day, Daniel looked forward to the next family gathering. After all, he had so much to celebrate. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. Marcus Bright had built his life like a fortress, methodical, calculated, and seemingly impenetrable. At 42, he commanded respect in the private security consulting world, his company providing protection for high-profile clients across the country. His steel-gray eyes had seen combat in Afghanistan, corporate espionage, and the darkest corners of human nature. Yet nothing had prepared him for the betrayal brewing in his own home. The Bright residence sat on 5 acres of manicured Texas landscape, complete with a swimming pool that reflected the setting sun like liquid gold. Marcus pulled his black Range Rover into the circular driveway, noting Derek McMahon's silver BMW already parked near the front entrance. Derek had become a frequent visitor over the past 3 months, introduced by Cheryl as a business associate from her interior design firm. "Daddy," Emma Adams Bright called from the front steps. At 16, she had inherited her late mother's sharp intelligence, but Marcus's unwavering loyalty. He had adopted her when she was 8, after her biological mother, his first wife, died in a car accident. Emma was the one pure thing in his increasingly complicated world. "How's my girl?" Marcus embraced her, inhaling the familiar scent of her vanilla perfume. "Derek's here again," Emma whispered, her voice carrying a tension that made Marcus's military instincts sharpen. "He's been asking me weird questions about you, about your work." Marcus's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "What kind of questions?" "Like whether you keep work files at home, if you travel with security details, stuff like that." Emma pulled back, her green eyes, so much like her biological mother's, filled with concern. "I don't trust him, Dad." Before Marcus could respond, Cheryl Kingbright appeared in the doorway. Even after 7 years of marriage, she still took his breath away. Her auburn hair caught the porch light, and her designer dress hugged curves that had graced magazine covers during her brief modeling career. But lately, something had changed in her hazel eyes, a distance that spoke of secrets. "Marcus, honey, you're home early," Cheryl said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Derek and I were just discussing the Henderson project." Derek McMahon emerged behind her, his 6-foot frame filling the doorway. At 35, he possessed the kind of rugged handsomeness that made him popular with wealthy clients seeking both interior design and, apparently, other services. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expensive watch catching the light as he extended his hand. "Marcus, good to see you again," Derek said, his grip firm but lasting a fraction too long. "Cheryl's been telling me about your fascinating work. Private security must be incredibly demanding." "It has its moments," Marcus replied, his voice neutral. He had learned long ago to reveal nothing until he understood the battlefield completely. That evening, over dinner at the mahogany table that had belonged to Marcus's grandfather, the conversation flowed with practiced ease. Derek regaled them with stories from his latest projects, a tech mobile's penthouse, a senator's countryside estate. He was charming, attentive, and utterly convincing in his role as the family friend. But Marcus noticed the subtle touches, Derek's hand brushing Cheryl's when passing the salt, the way her laugh carried a breathless quality it had lost with Marcus years ago, the meaningful glances they shared when they thought he wasn't looking. After Derek left, Marcus retreated to his study while Cheryl and Emma cleaned up. The room was his sanctuary, lined with military commendations, photos from his security consulting days, and a gun safe that held more than just firearms. He poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and activated the secure laptop that connected him to his network of contacts worldwide. Owen Ward answered on the second ring. "Marcus, what's the situation?" Owen had served under Marcus in the Rangers, his specialty being long-range reconnaissance and elimination. After discharge, he had transitioned into freelance work, the kind that didn't appear on tax returns. His loyalty to Marcus was absolute, forged in the mountains of Afghanistan where Marcus had pulled him from a burning Humvee. "I need surveillance on a target," Marcus said, sending Derek's photo and details through their encrypted channel. "Full background, financial records, communication intercepts. I want to know what brand of toothpaste he uses." "How deep do you want me to go?" Marcus took a long sip of bourbon, feeling its burn match the cold fire growing in his chest. "All the way to the bottom, Owen. This one's personal." After ending the call, Marcus sat in the darkness, his mind already working through possibilities. In his world, information was power, and power was survival. If Derek McMahon thought he could walk into Marcus Bright's life and take what belonged to him, he was about to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating a man who had spent 20 years perfecting the art of controlled violence. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed midnight as Marcus began planning what would become the most important operation of his life. Chapter 2: The Discovery. 3 days later, Owen's report arrived via encrypted email, and Marcus felt the foundation of his world crack like thin ice. Derek McMahon wasn't just sleeping with his wife. He was a professional con artist with a specialty in wealthy, lonely spouses. His real name was Derek McMahon, and he had left a trail of broken marriages and emptied bank accounts across 4 states. Marcus sat in his downtown office, the Dallas skyline glittering beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows. The report detailed Derek's methods: identify the target, study their weaknesses, infiltrate their social circle, seduce the spouse, gather financial information, then disappear with everything he could liquidate. The timeline was typically 6 months. Derek had been working Cheryl for 3. But there was more. The surveillance footage Owen had gathered showed Derek and Cheryl at the Adolphus Hotel, their passion evident even through the grainy telephoto images. In one particularly damning video, Cheryl was laughing as she showed Derek documents Marcus recognized as his own financial records. The betrayal cut deeper than any shrapnel he had taken in Afghanistan. But unlike those battlefield wounds, this one demanded a different kind of surgery. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, can we talk? It's about Mom and Derek." He drove home through afternoon traffic, his mind cold and calculating. The house felt different now, tainted by deception and greed. He found Emma in the pool house, her usual after-school refuge where she did homework and practiced guitar. "I saw them together," Emma said without preamble, her young face aged by knowledge no teenager should carry. "Yesterday, when they thought I was at soccer practice." "They were in your bedroom, Dad." Marcus sat beside her on the wicker couch, his large hands gentle as he took hers. "How long have you known?" "About a month. I wanted to tell you, but I wasn't sure how." Tears gathered in her green eyes. "She's not who I thought she was. Neither of them are." "No, sweetheart, they're not." Marcus's voice carried a deadly calm that Emma had heard only once before, the day he had confronted the drunk driver who had nearly hit her school bus. "But here's what we're going to do about it." That evening, Marcus called a family meeting. They gathered in the living room, Cheryl curled on the leather sofa in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater that had cost more than most people's monthly salary. Derek had been invited, another business discussion that was becoming increasingly frequent. "I've been thinking about our future," Marcus began, his voice warm and conversational. "My work has been demanding lately, and I realize I haven't been the husband and father I should be." Cheryl's face showed surprise, while Derek's expression remained carefully neutral. Emma, seated across from them, played her part perfectly, the concerned daughter worried about her parents' marriage. "I want to make some changes," Marcus continued, "starting with a family vacation. I've been looking at properties in Costa Rica, beach houses, complete privacy, a chance for us to reconnect." "That sounds wonderful," Cheryl said, her voice carrying genuine warmth for the first time in months. "When were you thinking?" "Next month. I've already spoken with a realtor about a property in Manuel Antonio. Private beach, fully staffed, the works." Marcus smiled, but Emma caught the predatory gleam in his eyes. "Derek, you should join us. Consider it a working vacation. Cheryl mentioned you might be interested in expanding into international markets." Derek leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. "That's incredibly generous. Marcus, are you sure?" "Absolutely. Family friends are important." Marcus's smile never wavered. "Besides, it would give us a chance to get to know each other better. I feel like we've been dancing around a real friendship." After Derek left that night, Marcus and Emma sat on the back patio, while Cheryl took her usual evening bath. The pool lights cast rippling reflections on the water, and Marcus found himself studying the depth markers along the sides. "You have a plan," Emma said. It wasn't a question. "I have the beginning of one." Marcus looked at his daughter, this brave young woman who had chosen his side without hesitation. "But it's going to require both of us to be very convincing actors for the next few weeks." "What do you need me to do?" Marcus outlined the basics, continued normalcy, gathering information, and most importantly, making Derek believe he was winning. Emma listened with the focused attention she had inherited from her adoptive father, asking strategic questions that reminded Marcus why he was so proud of her. "There's one more thing," Marcus said as they prepared to go inside. "I need you to understand that after this is over, nothing will be the same. Your relationship with Cheryl will end permanently. Are you prepared for that?" Emma stared at the pool for a long moment, then met his eyes with a resolve that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "She stopped being my mom the day she chose him over our family. I'm with you, Dad, whatever it takes." That night, Marcus lay awake beside his sleeping wife, listening to her breath and memorizing the sound. Soon, She would understand the difference between Marcus Bright, the loving husband, and Marcus Bright, the man who had survived 3 tours in hell by never showing mercy to his enemies. The grandfather clock chimed 3 a.m. as Marcus began refining the details of Derek McMahon's destruction. Chapter 3. The Recruitment. 2 weeks into the charade, Marcus had assembled his team. The Costa Rica vacation was a convenient cover for bringing together the specialists he would need for what he had begun thinking of as Operation Clean House. Owen Ward arrived first, his military bearing evident despite his casual clothes. He had been conducting surveillance from a rented apartment across from Derek's place, documenting every move, every visitor, every weakness. His preliminary report was thorough. Derek was overconfident, had no military training, and relied entirely on charm and manipulation rather than physical prowess. "He's soft," Owen reported as they sat in Marcus's study. "Never been in a real fight, probably never even held a gun. This won't be difficult from a tactical standpoint." "It's not about difficulty," Marcus replied, studying Derek's profile photos. "It's about sending a message that reaches beyond just him." The second recruit was Calvin Bond, a former Navy SEAL who now ran a private investigation firm specializing in corporate espionage. Calvin had the unique skill of making people disappear, not permanently, but thoroughly enough that they cease to exist in any meaningful way. Bank accounts, credit reports, social security numbers, employment records. Calvin could erase a person's entire digital footprint with surgical precision. "Your wife's boyfriend has been sloppy," Calvin reported during their meeting at an upscale downtown restaurant. "He's got accounts under 3 different names, but all traceable once you know the patterns. Give me the word, and Derek McMahon becomes a ghost." The third member was unexpected, Jeremiah Jacobs, Cheryl's own divorce attorney. Marcus had approached him not for legal advice, but for strategic intelligence. Jeremiah was ambitious, expensive, and utterly without loyalty to any client who couldn't continue paying his fees. "She's been asking hypothetical questions about asset division," Jeremiah revealed over drinks at his private club. "Specifically, what would happen to your business holdings in a divorce, and whether your military pension could be touched." "How hypothetical?" Marcus asked. "She scheduled a formal consultation for next week, under a false name, but my secretary recognized her from the society pages." Jeremiah's smile was predatory. "For the right consideration, I could provide you with advance notice of her strategy." Marcus paid Jeremiah's retainer that night, ensuring that every move Cheryl made would be reported back to him within hours. But the most crucial recruitment happened at home, with Emma continuing to play the role of the naive daughter while gathering intelligence that professional operatives couldn't access. She had befriended Derek, playing up her supposed admiration for his sophistication and worldliness. In return, Derek had begun treating her like a confidant, sharing details about his relationship with Cheryl that revealed the depth of their planning. "He thinks you're some kind of government contractor," Emma reported during one of their evening strategy sessions. "Cheryl told him about your overseas clients and the cash payments. They're planning to clean out your accounts and disappear to Monaco. Timeline: he wants to move faster, but Cheryl is insisting on waiting until after your Costa Rica trip. She thinks you'll be more relaxed and trusting afterward." Emma's voice carried disgust. She actually said it would be easier to finish things once you're emotionally invested in fixing the marriage. Marcus felt something cold and final settle in his chest. He had given Cheryl 7 years of his life, his protection, his name, and his complete trust. She had responded by calculating the most efficient way to destroy him. That weekend, Marcus hosted a barbecue, ostensibly to celebrate Derek's birthday. The guest list was carefully chosen. Owen and Calvin, introduced as old military friends, Jeremiah and his wife, presented as longtime family friends, and several of Marcus's legitimate business associates, providing cover for the operational discussions happening in plain sight. Derek basked in the attention, playing the role of Cheryl's successful boyfriend while charming the wives and impressing the men with his knowledge of fine wines and luxury travel. He was good at his job, Marcus admitted, probably the most convincing sociopath he had encountered outside of a war zone. But Derek made one crucial mistake. He underestimated Emma. During the party, as adults mingled around the pool and bar, Derek approached Emma where she sat on the diving board, her feet dangling in the water. "You know, Emma, you're really mature for your age," Derek said, his voice carrying a tone that made Emma's skin crawl. "Most kids your age wouldn't understand the complexity of adult relationships." "What do you mean?" Emma asked, her voice carefully innocent. "Well, sometimes people fall out of love, and new love has to make room for itself. Your father's a good man, but he's not the right man for your mother anymore." Derek sat beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "When that happens, sometimes changes have to be made for everyone's happiness." Emma looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Are you saying you and Mom are going to get married?" "Maybe someday, sweetheart, but that would mean some difficult adjustments for everyone." Derek's hand squeezed gently. "I want us to be a family, you know? A real family. Would you like that?" "I think so," Emma said, then added with calculated innocence. "Would we keep living here? In Dad's house?" Derek's smile was answer enough. That night, after the last guest had left and the pool lights reflected off empty beer bottles and discarded paper plates, Marcus and Emma sat in his study reviewing the evening's intelligence. Emma's account of Derek's conversation was the final piece Marcus needed, proof that Derek wasn't just planning to steal his wife and money, but to replace him entirely. "He's not just a con man," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. "He's a predator who thinks he can take my life, my home, and my daughter." Emma met his eyes with steady resolve. "So what do we do now?" Marcus opened his laptop and began typing a message to Owen Ward. The subject line read, "Operation Clean House, Phase 2 authorized." "Now, sweetheart," Marcus said as he hit send, "we teach Derek McMahon what happens when someone tries to destroy the wrong family." The grandfather clock chimed midnight, marking the end of Derek's last peaceful night on Earth. Chapter 4. The Setup. The Costa Rica vacation planning provided perfect cover for Marcus's real preparations. While Cheryl and Derek pored over travel brochures and discussed restaurants in Manuel Antonio, Marcus was coordinating with Owen to transform their Texas property into a carefully orchestrated trap. "The pool area is ideal," Owen reported during their secure video call. He was speaking from a hotel room in Austin, where he was supposedly attending a veterans conference. Clear sight lines from multiple positions, controlled access points, and the acoustics will work in our favor. Marcus studied the tactical photographs Owen had taken of their backyard. "What about civilians? The neighbors?" "The Hendersons are in Europe for another month, and the Kowalskis never use their back patio after dark. We'll have complete operational security." Owen's face was serious on the screen. "Are you certain about the timeline? Once we initiate, there's no pulling back." "I'm certain," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded soldiers in combat. Derek has accelerated his own schedule. Jeremiah says Cheryl is meeting with him tomorrow to finalize divorce papers. She's planning to serve me the day we return from Costa Rica. The next evening, Marcus played his role perfectly. He arrived home with flowers, white roses, Cheryl's favorites, and a bottle of champagne to celebrate their upcoming trip. Derek was there, as he increasingly was, helping Cheryl pack and offering suggestions about beachside dining. "This is going to be perfect," Cheryl said, her eyes bright with what Marcus now recognized as greed rather than love. "Just what our marriage needs." Derek raised his wine glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his smile carrying the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. Marcus clinked his glass against Derek's, maintaining eye contact. "To getting exactly what we deserve," he replied. Emma, sitting nearby with her homework, looked up and caught her father's eye. The silent communication between them was brief but complete. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Over the following days, Marcus made a show of tying up business loose ends before their departure. He met with clients, cleared his schedule, and made arrangements for his company to operate in his absence. But his real activities were far more focused. Calvin Bond provided the technical infrastructure, installing nearly invisible surveillance equipment throughout the house and grounds. The cameras were military-grade, designed for hostile environments, and completely undetectable to civilians. More importantly, They would provide undeniable documentation of everything that was about to unfold. The audio pickup is crystal clear, Calvin demonstrated from his laptop. Every conversation, every whisper, every breath will be recorded. When this is over, you'll have enough evidence to justify anything that happens. Marcus also made one final recruitment. Tim Owen, a local businessman who ran a small aircraft charter service. Tim was an old friend from Marcus's early days in Texas, and more importantly, he was someone who understood the value of discretion and asking no questions. "I need a flight plan filed for Costa Rica, scheduled for next Thursday," Marcus told Tim over lunch at their usual downtown restaurant. "But I also need the flexibility to change destinations without notice." "No problem," Tim replied, his weathered face asking no questions. "Private strips in Mexico, Caribbean, wherever you need to go. Cash basis, no records." That evening, Marcus made his final preparations in the study. He cleaned and loaded his service pistol, a Sig Sauer P226 that had been his companion through 3 combat deployments. He updated his will, leaving everything to Emma with specific instructions for his business partners. Most importantly, he recorded a video message explaining his actions, to be released only if the operation went catastrophically wrong. "If you're watching this," Marcus said to the camera, "then Derek McMahon and Cheryl Kingbright succeeded in destroying my life. The evidence you'll find in this room will explain why I had no choice but to respond with extreme prejudice." Friday night, 3 days before their scheduled departure, Derek made his final mistake. He arrived at the house earlier than usual, around 6 p.m., carrying an expensive bottle of wine and wearing the confident smile of a man about to close a business deal. "Marcus, I hope you don't mind," Derek said as they gathered in the living room, "but I've been thinking about our Costa Rica trip, and I have a proposition." Marcus settled into his leather chair, accepting the wine with apparent pleasure. "I'm listening." "Well, Cheryl and I have been discussing the future, your future specifically. We think you work too hard, carry too much stress." Derek's voice carried practiced sympathy. "What if this vacation becomes something more? What if you find a way to step back from the day-to-day pressures and enjoy life?" Emma looked up from her phone with perfectly feigned curiosity. "What do you mean?" Derek exchanged a meaningful look with Cheryl before continuing. "I know some people in Costa Rica, investors, business owners. They're always looking for partners with Marcus's expertise. With the right connections, you could establish a security consulting firm down there, work when you want to live in paradise." "That sounds amazing," Marcus said, his voice warm with false interest. "But what about my business here? My clients, my obligations?" "That's the beauty of it," Cheryl interjected, her voice carrying an excitement that made Marcus's blood run cold. "You could liquidate your current holdings, use the capital to start fresh. Clean slate, new life, no stress." Marcus pretended to consider this, sipping his wine thoughtfully. In reality, he was memorizing every word, every gesture, every tell that revealed their true intentions. They weren't just planning to steal his money. They were planning to isolate him in a foreign country, away from his resources and contacts, where he would be completely vulnerable. "It's an intriguing idea," Marcus finally said. "Let me think about it over the weekend. We can discuss details once we're down there, see how the place feels." Derek's smile was triumphant. "That's all we ask. Just keep an open mind." That night, after Derek left and Cheryl retired to her bath with another glass of wine, Marcus and Emma sat by the pool. The underwater lights cast eerie shadows on the bottom, and Marcus found himself studying the deep end where the pool reached 12 feet. "They're planning to kill you," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying absolute certainty. Marcus nodded slowly. "In Costa Rica, somewhere remote, probably made to look like an accident. Derek gets the grieving widow, plus whatever life insurance he can access. But they don't know that you know." "No, they don't." Marcus looked at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who had chosen to stand with him against the world. "Are you ready for this, sweetheart? Once it begins, there's no going back for any of us." Emma met his eyes with steady resolve. "I've been ready since the day I saw them together in your bedroom. They destroyed our family, Dad. Now they pay the price." The pool filter hummed quietly in the darkness, circulating water that would soon hold far more than chlorine and designer pool chemicals. In 48 hours, Derek McMahon would discover the difference between planning a con and surviving a war. Chapter 5. The Psychological Warfare. Sunday morning arrived gray and humid, with storm clouds gathering over Dallas like an omen. Marcus woke early, his internal clock still set to military time, and found Derek's BMW already in the driveway. The man was becoming bold in his final days, apparently confident enough to spend entire weekends in Marcus's home. In the kitchen, Marcus discovered Derek making breakfast. Eggs Benedict with hollandaise sauce, fresh fruit artfully arranged, coffee in the expensive French press that had been a wedding gift. The domesticity of it was almost insulting. "Morning, Marcus," Derek said with easy familiarity. "Hope you don't mind. I thought I'd surprise everyone with breakfast. Cheryl mentioned you love Eggs Benedict." "Thoughtful of you," Marcus replied, accepting a cup of coffee while studying Derek's movements. The man was comfortable in the space, knowing where everything was kept, moving with the confidence of someone who already considered this his home. Cheryl appeared in silk pajamas and a robe, her hair perfectly tousled in a way that had once driven Marcus wild. Now he recognized it as another performance, calculated to maintain the illusion of domestic bliss. "Isn't this nice?" she said, kissing Derek's cheek while barely acknowledging Marcus. "Like a real family." Emma entered wearing workout clothes, her expression carefully neutral. "Smells good," she said, though Marcus caught the slight tightness around her eyes that indicated she was fighting revulsion. During breakfast, Derek launched into what Marcus recognized as his closing pitch. The Costa Rica plan was expanded now. Marcus could sell his business to Calvin Bond, who was supposedly interested in expanding into private security, liquidate his assets, and move south permanently. Derek had contacts who could fast-track residency papers, investment opportunities, even a house already picked out. "The place I found is incredible," Derek said, showing photos on his phone. "Ocean view, private beach, completely isolated. You could live like a king down there, Marcus. No stress, no corporate politics, just sun and surf." Marcus studied the photos with apparent interest, noting the property's isolation and the lack of nearby neighbors or roads. It was perfect for murder. In the criminal world, Derek might have succeeded. But Derek had never faced someone who had spent years planning military operations where failure meant death. "It looks amazing," Marcus said. "When will we need to make a decision?" "Well, that's the thing," Cheryl interjected, her voice carrying practiced urgency. "The property won't stay on the market long. If we're serious, we need to move fast. Maybe extend our vacation, stay down there long enough to handle the paperwork." "Extend how long?" Emma asked, her concern sounding genuine. Derek smiled at her with paternal warmth that made Marcus's trigger finger itch. "Maybe a month or two, sweetheart. Just until everything's finalized." Marcus made a show of considering this, then nodded slowly. "You know what? Let's do it. Life's too short not to take chances." The relief and triumph on Cheryl and Derek's faces was almost comical. They exchanged a look that spoke volumes. The fish was hooked, ready to be reeled in and cleaned. That afternoon, while Derek and Cheryl went shopping for their extended vacation wardrobe, Marcus initiated the final phase of his preparations. Owen Ward arrived at the house, carrying a golf bag that contained far more than golf clubs. "Perimeter is secured," Owen reported as they walked the property. "I've got 3 positions with clear lines of sight to the pool area. Backup routes established, emergency extraction protocols in place." They stopped at the pool house, where Owen had established his primary overwatch position. From here, he had an unobstructed view of the entire backyard, while remaining invisible to anyone in the main house. "What about the girl?" Owen asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Emma knows exactly what her role is," Marcus replied. "She's stronger than people give her credit for." Owen nodded, but Marcus caught the concern in his old friend's eyes. This wasn't Afghanistan, where the rules of engagement were clear and the enemy wore different uniforms. This was personal, messy, and involved a 16-year-old girl who was about to watch her stepmother's boyfriend die violently. "Marcus," Owen said carefully, "I've been thinking about alternatives. We could just disappear him, Make it look like he ran off with someone else's money. No need for. No. Marcus's voice carried absolute finality. Derek McMahon chose to threaten my daughter, steal from my family, and plan my murder. He gets what that deserves. Sunday evening brought the final dinner before their departure. Derek arrived with champagne and flowers, playing the role of devoted family friend. But Marcus noticed new details, the way Derek studied the security system panel, how he measured distances between rooms, the careful attention he paid to Emma's routines. The man wasn't just planning to rob and kill Marcus in Costa Rica. He was already casing the house for additional opportunities, treating Emma like another asset to be acquired. The realization filled Marcus with a cold rage that reminded him of his worst days in combat, when the enemy had threatened civilians under his protection. After dinner, Derek made his most revealing mistake yet. As they sat by the pool with drinks, he began questioning Emma about her plans for the future, college, career, relationships. His questions were too personal, too focused, carrying an undertone that made Emma visibly uncomfortable. "You're really growing up, Emma," Derek said, his voice carrying what he probably thought was paternal warmth. "Soon you'll be off to college, starting your own life. It's exciting, but also a little scary, isn't it?" "I guess," Emma replied, moving slightly closer to Marcus on the patio couch. "The thing is, sweetheart, family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing to care for each other." Derek's hand rested on the arm of his chair, fingers drumming in a pattern Marcus recognized as nervous energy. "When your father and Cheryl and I become a real family, I want you to know that I'll always be here for you. Whatever you need, whatever happens." The promise carried implications that made Marcus's vision red around the edges. Derek wasn't just planning to replace him. He was planning to groom Emma, to gradually normalize his presence in her life until she became another victim of his manipulation. "That's very kind of you," Emma said with perfect innocence, though Marcus saw her hands trembling slightly. "I'm lucky to have people who care about me." That night, after Derek finally left, Marcus found Emma in her bedroom, sitting on her bed with her knees drawn up to her chest. She looked younger than her 16 years, vulnerable in a way that reminded Marcus why he had adopted her in the first place, to protect her from a world that too often hurt innocent people. "He's going to try to hurt me too, isn't he?" Emma asked quietly. Marcus sat beside her on the bed, his large hand gentle on her shoulder. "Not while I'm alive to prevent it. And after Costa Rica, when you're supposed to be dead." Marcus met her eyes with absolute certainty. "Derek McMahon will never have the chance to hurt anyone again. I promise you that, sweetheart. On my honor as your father and as a soldier." Emma leaned against him, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I'm scared, Dad. Not of what we're going to do, but of what happens after. When it's all over and it's just us." Marcus held her close, feeling the weight of responsibility that had defined his entire adult life. "After it's over, we'll be free. Free to build whatever life we want, wherever we want to build it. But first, we have to finish this." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning illuminated the pool where Derek McMahon would soon discover that some men were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Chapter 6: The Final Hours. Tuesday evening, their last night before the Costa Rica departure, felt charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the storm clouds gathering overhead. Derek arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, carrying his luggage and wearing the satisfied expression of a man about to close the biggest deal of his career. "I can't believe we're really doing this," Cheryl said as they gathered in the living room for a final toast. She had spent the afternoon at the spa, her skin glowing and her eyes bright with anticipation. "It feels like the start of something incredible." Derek raised his champagne glass, his smile encompassing the room like a conquering general surveying his territory. "To new adventures and the courage to seize them," he said. "And to the family that's brave enough to change everything." Marcus clinked his glass against Derek's, studying the younger man's face. Derek was handsome, charming, and utterly convinced of his own invincibility. In 12 hours, he would be dead. "To getting what we deserve," Marcus replied, echoing his toast from days earlier. Emma, dressed in her favorite sundress for the trip, raised her sparkling cider with apparent enthusiasm. But Marcus caught the slight tremor in her hand, the careful control in her voice when she spoke. His daughter was playing her role perfectly, but the strain was showing. After dinner, Derek suggested a final swim. "The pool in Costa Rica won't be as nice as this one," he said, already stripping off a shirt to reveal the gym-sculpted physique that had undoubtedly helped him seduce countless victims. "We should enjoy it while we can." Cheryl joined him in the water, their laughter echoing off the pool house walls as they splashed and played like teenagers. Marcus watched from his lounge chair, memorizing the scene. By tomorrow night, the pool would need to be drained and professionally cleaned. Emma sat beside him, her feet dangling in the shallow end. To any observer, they looked like a normal family enjoying their last evening at home. But Marcus was conducting a final tactical assessment, noting sight lines, escape routes, and the precise depth markers that would matter in a few hours. "The water's perfect, Marcus," Derek called from the deep end. "Come on in." "Maybe later," Marcus replied. "I'm enjoying watching you two have fun." Derek swam closer to where Emma sat, his movements graceful and predatory. "What about you, Emma? Want to join us for a midnight swim tomorrow after the flight? I bet Costa Rican pools are warm enough for night swimming." "That sounds nice," Emma said, though Marcus saw her inch slightly away from Derek's reaching hand. "I've never swum in the ocean at night." "We'll have to change that," Derek said, his voice carrying promises that made Marcus's blood pressure spike. "There's a lot of new experiences waiting for you down there, sweetheart." At 10 p.m., Derek and Cheryl finally emerged from the pool, their bodies gleaming with water and moonlight. They toweled off while making final plans for the morning departure. Flight at 8 a.m., arrival in San Jose by afternoon, ground transportation to Manuel Antonio arranged by Derek's mysterious contacts. "I should head home and get some sleep," Derek said, though he made no move to leave. "Long day tomorrow." "You could stay here," Cheryl suggested with the kind of casual intimacy that confirmed everything Marcus already knew. "The guest room is made up, and it would save you the drive in the morning." Derek glanced at Marcus, his expression carefully respectful. "If you don't mind, that would be convenient." "Of course not," Marcus replied with perfect composure. "Consider yourself part of the family." The irony wasn't lost on him. Derek would indeed become part of the family in the most permanent way possible. By midnight, the house was quiet. Cheryl and Derek had retired to the guest room with whispered promises and barely contained laughter. Emma was supposedly asleep in her bedroom, though Marcus knew she was actually conducting final equipment checks and reviewing her role for tomorrow's performance. Marcus stood in his study, staring out at the pool where underwater lights cast dancing patterns on the surface. In 7 hours, Owen Ward would be in position. In 8 hours, Derek McMahon would wake up for the last time. In 10 hours, the most elaborate revenge operation of Marcus's life would reach its climax. He opened his laptop and typed a final message to Calvin Bond. Phase 3 authorized. Initiate at 0800 hours. Calvin's response came immediately. Roger. All systems green. Financial assets secured. While Derek and Cheryl slept in ignorant bliss, Calvin was systematically emptying every account Derek had hidden under his various aliases. By morning, Derek McMahon would be financially dead even before he became physically dead. Marcus checked his watch, 12:47 a.m. In less than 18 hours, he would be a widower and Derek McMahon would be fish food. The thought should have disturbed him, but Marcus felt only the cold satisfaction of a mission approaching completion. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact labeled Cleanup Services, a euphemism for Bernard Starr, a former Army medic who now provided specialized services to people who needed problems to disappear completely. Bernard's teams could make a crime scene look like anything from an accident to a random burglary, depending on the client's needs. Marcus typed a simple message, tomorrow evening. Location as discussed. Full service required. Bernard's reply was equally concise. Confirmed. Standard rates apply. At 3 a.m., Marcus made his final preparation. He went to his bedroom closet and retrieved a small wooden box that had belonged to his grandfather, a World War II veteran who had understood the sometimes brutal requirements of protecting family. Inside the box was his grandfather's dog tags, a few faded photographs, and a letter written to Marcus's father shortly before the old man's death. Sometimes, the letter read, "A man must choose between being civilized and being effective. When someone threatens your family, choose effectiveness. The world has enough civilized dead heroes." Marcus refolded the letter and placed it back in the box. His grandfather would have approved of what was about to happen. At 6 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Owen Ward. "In position. Targets acquired. Awaiting your signal." Marcus replied, "Proceed as planned. No mercy." At 7 a.m., Derek and Cheryl emerged from the guest room, their faces glowing with post-coital satisfaction and anticipation of the day ahead. They joined Marcus and Emma for breakfast, chattering excitedly about their travel plans and the new life waiting for them in Costa Rica. "This is it," Derek said, raising his coffee mug in a final toast. "The beginning of everything." Marcus smiled and raised his own mug. "The end of everything," he replied quietly, his words lost in the clatter of plates and excited conversation. At 7:30 a.m., they loaded their luggage into Marcus's Range Rover for the drive to the airport. Derek sat in the front passenger seat, completely relaxed and unsuspecting. Cheryl and Emma sat in the back, Cheryl chattering about shopping in Costa Rica, while Emma provided appropriately enthusiastic responses. As they pulled out of the driveway, Marcus caught Owen's eye through the rearview mirror. His old friend was hidden in the landscaping across the street, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. Owen nodded slightly. Everything was ready. Marcus turned onto the main road, driving toward what Derek and Cheryl believed was Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. In reality, they were driving toward Tim Owen's private airstrip, where a very different kind of flight plan was waiting. In the passenger seat, Derek hummed quietly to himself, utterly confident in his victory. In 20 minutes, he would discover that Marcus Bright was a far more dangerous enemy than he had ever imagined. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The private airstrip sat 30 miles outside Dallas, surrounded by scrub brush and heat shimmer that made the single runway look like a mirage. As Marcus pulled through the gates, Derek frowned at the modest facilities. "This isn't DFW," Derek said, his voice carrying the first hint of uncertainty Marcus had heard from him. "Private charter," Marcus explained smoothly. "More convenient, no security hassles. I use Tim's service for all my business travel." Derek relaxed, apparently satisfied with the explanation. Beside him, Cheryl was too busy taking selfies to pay attention to their surroundings. In the back seat, Emma sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap like a soldier awaiting orders. Tim Owen emerged from the small terminal building, his weathered face split by a genuine smile. "Marcus, ready for your Costa Rica adventure?" "More than ready," Marcus replied, shaking his old friend's hand. "Any changes to the flight plan?" "Actually, yes," Tim said, his tone casual but his eyes serious. "Got a call from air traffic control. We need to make a quick stop back at your place. Some paperwork issue with the international flight plan. Shouldn't take more than an hour." Derek's frown deepened. "What kind of paperwork issue?" Tim launched into a detailed explanation about customs documentation and international security protocols, his words carrying the authority of someone who had been flying for 30 years. It was complete fiction, but Derek had no expertise to contradict him. "So we go back to the house, sort it out, then return here?" Cheryl asked, clearly irritated by the delay. "That's right," Marcus said. "Sorry for the inconvenience, but better safe than sorry with international travel." 20 minutes later, they were pulling back into the Bright family driveway. The house looked exactly as they had left it, peaceful, suburban, normal. Derek couldn't have known that Owen Ward was already in position, that Calvin Bond was monitoring every electronic device on the property, or that Bernard Starr's cleanup crew was standing by 5 miles away. "This is frustrating," Derek muttered as they entered through the front door. "We're going to miss our connection in San Jose." "Relax," Marcus said, his voice carrying the calm authority that had once commanded soldiers in combat. "Why don't we take a quick swim while Tim sorts out the paperwork? The pool's heated, the The sun's out. Might as well enjoy the delay. Derek's mood brightened at the suggestion. You know what? That's not a bad idea. When life gives you lemons. 20 minutes later, they were assembled by the pool. Derek wore his expensive swim trunks and the confident smile of a man who believed his luck was holding. Cheryl had changed into a bikini that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Emma sat on the edge, her feet in the water, playing her role perfectly. Marcus emerged from the pool house carrying drinks, cold beer for Derek, wine for Cheryl, iced tea for himself and Emma. He had been very careful about who got which drink. To making the best of unexpected delays, Marcus toasted, raising his glass. They drank, chatted about their travel plans, and enjoyed the afternoon sun. Derek was relaxed now, back in his element, regaling them with stories about previous Costa Rica trips and the contacts who would make their new life possible. I have to admit, Derek said, floating on his back in the deep end, this is nice. Maybe we should just stay here and forget about traveling. Funny you should mention that, Marcus said, his voice carrying a new edge that made Emma sit up straighter. I've been thinking the same thing. Derek treaded water, his expression shifting to mild confusion as the drugs in his beer began to take effect. What do you mean? I mean, Marcus said, standing up from his lounge chair, that I know exactly who you are, Derek McMahon. I know about your real name, your criminal record, your bank accounts in 3 different states. I know about the other families you've destroyed, the other husbands you've cuckolded and robbed. Derek's face went pale, but the sedative was slowing his reactions. He looked towards Cheryl for support, but she was staring at Marcus with dawning horror. Marcus, what are you talking about? Cheryl said, her voice shrill with growing panic. I'm talking about betrayal. Marcus replied, his voice deadly calm. I'm talking about my wife planning to divorce me after cleaning out my accounts. I'm talking about her boyfriend planning to murder me in Costa Rica and then groom my 16-year-old daughter. Emma stood up, her face showing none of the surprise or confusion that Derek and Cheryl might have expected. Instead, she looked at her stepmother with cold contempt. You thought you were so clever, Emma said, her young voice carrying an authority that belied her years. But you forgot one thing. I love my father more than I could ever fear you. Derek tried to swim toward the pool's edge, but the sedative had sapped his coordination. He floundered in the deep water, panic beginning to override the chemical fog in his brain. Marcus, Derek gasped. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Marcus interrupted. My wife's new boyfriend held my daughter underwater in our pool. Said I had 30 seconds to confess. I heard her struggling, gasping. Derek's eyes widened as he realized Marcus was reciting a script that Derek was about to be forced to perform. Confess to what? Marcus screamed, his voice carrying perfectly to the recording devices hidden around the pool area. Derek tried to speak, but the sedative had reached his vocal cords. He could only watch in growing horror as Marcus continued the performance. Fine, I'll tell you everything, Marcus shouted. That's when Derek felt strong hands grab his ankles, pulling him under the water. Owen Ward had entered the pool from the deep end, using scuba gear to approach unseen. Derek fought with drug desperation, but Owen was a professional killer who had trained for underwater combat. As Derek thrashed beneath the surface, Emma looked at her stepmother with steady eyes and said, Good job, sweetheart. Then Marcus gave a barely perceptible signal, and a red laser appeared on Derek's forehead as Owen pulled him back to the surface. Derek gasped and choked, his eyes wild with terror as he realized the scope of the trap he had walked into. Please, he managed to whisper, I can explain. The explanation never came. Owen's blade found Derek's carotid artery with surgical precision, and Derek McMahon bled out in the same pool where he had planned to terrorize a 16-year-old girl. Cheryl screamed, but the sound died in her throat as she met Marcus's eyes. She saw something there that she had never seen before, the cold, implacable gaze of a man who had killed enemies of his country and would kill enemies of his family with equal efficiency. Your turn, Cheryl, Marcus said quietly. Time to discuss your future. Chapter 8, The Cleanup. Cheryl Kingbright had never seen a man die before, and Derek's death had been neither quick nor clean. She stood frozen by the pool's edge, her designer bikini soaked with splashed water and Derek's blood, watching Owen Ward efficiently secure the body with weights that would ensure it never surfaced. "Sit down, Cheryl," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same calm authority he had used with enemy prisoners. "We need to talk." Cheryl collapsed into a patio chair, her entire body shaking. "Marcus, please, I can explain. You can explain how you planned to divorce me after stealing my assets." Marcus asked conversationally. "Or how you shared my financial information with a career criminal. Or maybe you'd like to explain why you thought it was acceptable to put Emma in danger." Emma had moved to stand beside her father, her young face showing no distress at the violence she had just witnessed. If anything, she looked relieved, as if a terrible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I never meant for Emma to be hurt," Cheryl whispered, her voice barely audible. "But you were willing to let Derek groom her," Marcus replied. "You were willing to let him become her stepfather, knowing what kind of man he was. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are." Owen emerged from the pool, his movements efficient and professional. Derek's body had disappeared beneath the surface, weighed down in the deep end where it would remain until Bernard Starr's team arrived for final disposal. "Target eliminated," Owen reported quietly. "No complications." Marcus nodded, then turned his attention back to his wife. "Here's what's going to happen, Cheryl. You have two choices, and I suggest you choose carefully." Cheryl looked up at him with desperate hope. "What choices?" "Choice 1. You disappear. Tonight. Forever. Calvin Bond has already prepared a new identity for you. Sarah Mitchell, unremarkable divorced woman from Phoenix. You get $50,000 and a bus ticket. You never contact me, Emma, or anyone from your old life again. You never remarry, never have children, never do anything that might bring attention to your new identity." "And choice 2?" Cheryl asked, though her voice suggested she didn't want to know. Marcus's smile was colder than winter in Afghanistan. "Choice 2 is you join Derek in the deep end of the pool." The silence stretched for long moments, broken only by the pool filter's gentle hum and the distant sound of traffic. Cheryl stared at her husband, this man she had shared a bed with for 7 years, but had never really known. "You're not joking," she whispered. "I never joke about protecting my family," Marcus replied. "Derek thought he could walk into my house, steal my life, and threaten my daughter. He discovered that some mistakes are permanent. The question is whether you want to learn the same lesson." Emma spoke for the first time since Derek's death, her voice carrying a maturity that reminded Marcus why he was so proud of her. "Cheryl, you have 5 minutes to decide. After that, Dad's going to assume you've chosen option 2. Cheryl looked at Emma with something approaching awe. "You planned this together. All of it. From the moment I caught you with Derek in Dad's bedroom," Emma confirmed. "You stopped being my mother that day. After that, you were just another threat to my family." The brutality of the statement, delivered in Emma's calm, matter-of-fact tone, seemed to break something inside Cheryl. She began to cry, not the manipulative tears Marcus had seen so often during their marriage, but the desperate sobs of someone who had finally understood the consequences of her actions. "I never wanted it to go this far," Cheryl managed between sobs. "Derek said it would be easy, that you would never find out, that we could just disappear and start over. With my money," Marcus pointed out, "after murdering me in Costa Rica." "I didn't know about that part," Cheryl insisted. He said you would just sign the divorce papers and move on." Owen Ward snorted derisively. "Lady, your boyfriend had a detailed plan for disposing of your husband's body in the Costa Rican jungle. We found it on his laptop along with research about local burial practices and wildlife patterns." The revelation hit Cheryl like a physical blow. He was going to kill Marcus anyway. "And eventually you too," Emma added helpfully, "once he had control of the money and could find a younger replacement. We found communications with 3 other women he was grooming for future cons." Cheryl's sobs intensified, but Marcus felt no sympathy. She had made her choices with clear eyes and selfish intentions. The fact that Derek had planned to betray her too was simply justice. "Time's up," Marcus announced, checking his watch. "What's your decision, Cheryl?" Cheryl looked around the pool area, at Derek's blood still staining the concrete, at Owen Ward's professional indifference, at Emma's cold contempt, at Marcus's implacable resolve. She was surrounded by people who had already written her obituary and were simply waiting for her signature. "I'll disappear," she whispered. "Sarah Mitchell, Phoenix. I understand." Marcus nodded to Calvin Bond, who emerged from the pool house, carrying a manila envelope and a small suitcase. "Your new documents are inside," Calvin said, his voice clinically professional. "Birth certificate, social security card, driver's license, credit history going back 5 years. Sarah Mitchell is a completely real person as far as any database is concerned." "The money?" Cheryl asked. "Cash," Calvin replied, indicating the suitcase. "Untraceable bills. Enough to establish yourself somewhere Derek's network can't find you, which is good because some of his former associates aren't going to be happy about his disappearance." The threat was clear. Cheryl wasn't just running from Marcus, but from Derek's criminal contacts who would assume she had been involved in his death. "You have 1 hour to pack essentials," Marcus told her. "Nothing valuable, nothing that can be traced. Calvin will drive you to the bus station, and then Sarah Mitchell begins her new life." Cheryl stood on shaking legs, looking around the home she had shared with Marcus for 7 years. "What about our marriage? The divorce?" "Cheryl King-Bright will simply vanish," Marcus explained. "No divorce necessary when there's no one to divorce. Eventually, I'll have you declared legally dead and move on with my life." As Cheryl stumbled toward the house to pack, Emma caught her arm. For a moment, Cheryl's face showed hope. Perhaps her stepdaughter would show mercy, would provide some comfort in this nightmare. Instead, Emma's voice was ice cold. "If you ever try to contact us, if you ever use your real name, if you ever do anything that brings trouble back to my father, I will personally hunt you down and finish what we started here tonight. Do you understand me?" Cheryl nodded mutely, finally understanding that the sweet 16-year-old girl she had dismissed as naive was actually her husband's daughter in every way that mattered. 45 minutes later, Calvin Bond's car disappeared down the driveway, carrying Sarah Mitchell toward her new life of permanent exile. Marcus and Emma stood by the pool, watching the taillights fade into the distance. "Do you think she'll try to come back?" Emma asked. Marcus shook his head. "Cheryl was always a coward. She'll convince herself that Sarah Mitchell is better than death, and eventually she'll start to believe it." Owen Ward began the final cleanup phase, draining the pool while Bernard Starr's team prepared to remove all traces of Derek McMahon's existence. By morning, there would be no evidence that Derek had ever been in the house, much less died there. "What now?" Emma asked as they walked back toward the house. Marcus put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, feeling the fierce pride that came from knowing she had stood with him against the world. "Now we go back to being a family. A real family, without lies or betrayal. Just us. Just us," Marcus confirmed. "And anyone who tries to threaten that family learns the same lesson Derek learned tonight." As they entered the house, Emma paused at the threshold. "Dad, I'm proud of you. For protecting us. For not letting them win." Marcus kissed the top of her head, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. You're the strongest person I know." Behind them, the pool sat empty and gleaming under the floodlights, all traces of violence scrubbed away by professionals who understood the price of crossing Marcus Bright. By dawn, it would be filled with fresh water and ready for normal family use. But Marcus and Emma would never swim in it again. Some victories came with a cost, and the pool would forever remind them of the night they chose family over forgiveness and survival over civilization. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, Marcus Bright stood in the kitchen of their new home in Montana, watching Emma practice violin through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a pristine mountain lake. They had left Texas quietly, selling the Dallas house to a family who had no idea of its violent history. The pool had been filled with fresh concrete at Marcus's insistence. Some graves were better left permanently sealed. The Montana property was everything the Texas house had not been: isolated, defensible, and bought with cash under a corporate shell that Calvin Bond had established. Marcus Bright, the security consultant, had officially retired, His business sold to a competitor for a sum that allowed him to disappear into comfortable anonymity. "Morning, Dad," Emma called as she came inside, her cheeks flushed from the mountain air. At 17 now, she had grown into a young woman who carried herself with quiet confidence and spoke with the precision of someone who understood the weight of words. "Morning, sweetheart," Marcus replied, pouring her coffee in the mug that read, "World's Best Daughter," a Father's Day gift that he treasured above his military commendations. "Sleep well." "Like the dead," Emma said, then paused at her choice of words. "Sorry, old habits." Marcus smiled. They had learned to be careful with their language in those first months after Dallas, when every casual phrase seemed loaded with double meaning. Time had eased the psychological aftershocks, but some changes were permanent. The morning brought their usual routine: breakfast together, review of the day's security protocols, and discussion of Emma's college preparations. She had been accepted to Montana State University with a full scholarship, her essay on overcoming family adversity having impressed the admissions committee without revealing any specifics they couldn't handle. Owen called last night. Marcus mentioned as they ate. "He's thinking about retiring to somewhere warm." "Good for him," Emma replied. "He's earned it." Owen Ward had remained in Texas long enough to ensure that Derek McMahon's disappearance was never investigated. The official story was that Derek had fled to avoid mounting debts, leaving behind creditors and at least 2 other women who claimed he had stolen their money. The authorities seemed satisfied that Derek was simply another con man who had moved on to greener pastures. "Any word from Calvin?" Emma asked. "Sarah Mitchell is working as a restaurant hostess in Tucson," Marcus reported, "living quietly, no contact with anyone from her past life. She's kept her word." They never spoke Cheryl's real name anymore, having collectively decided that Cheryl Kingbright had died that night in Dallas. Sarah Mitchell was someone else entirely, a stranger who shared their former wife and mother's face, but had no claim on their loyalty or concern. The doorbell chimed, an unusual sound in their isolated location. Marcus checked the security monitors and saw the FedEx truck parked in their circular driveway. The driver was genuine. Marcus recognized him from previous deliveries, but the sender was unexpected. The package was addressed to Emma, with a return address in Switzerland. Inside was a single manila envelope containing a letter and a bank routing slip. "It's from Jeremiah Jacobs," Emma said, reading the letterhead. "Cheryl's old divorce attorney." Marcus read over her shoulder as Emma unfolded the letter. "Dear Miss Adamsbright, I am writing to inform you that my client, Cheryl Kingbright, has been declared legally dead after her disappearance 6 months ago. As she died intestate, her personal assets have been distributed according to state law. As her surviving stepchild, you are entitled to her personal effects and remaining financial accounts. The total sum of $127,000 has been deposited into the account specified below. Additionally, several items of jewelry and personal effects are being held at my office for your collection at your convenience. Please contact my office to arrange retrieval of these items. Sincerely, Jeremiah Jacobs, attorney at law." Emma looked at the bank routing slip, then at her father. "Cheryl had her own money?" "Apparently more than we knew," Marcus replied, though he wasn't surprised. Cheryl had always been good at hiding things when it served her purposes. "What should I do with it?" Marcus considered the question carefully. The money was legitimately Emma's under the law, and keeping it would raise no suspicions. More importantly, it represented a final severing of ties with their old life. "It's yours," he said finally. "College fund, maybe, or save it for whatever comes next." Emma folded the letter and set it aside. What do you think she would have done with it? If things had gone differently? "Probably spent it on Derek," Marcus replied honestly, "or whoever came after Derek." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the morning sun reflect off the lake. The water was clear and cold, nothing like the chlorinated pool where their old life had ended. Fish jumped occasionally, sending ripples across the perfect surface. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked quietly. "What we did?" Marcus considered the question seriously. In 6 months, Derek's disappearance had saved at least 3 other women from his cons, based on the communications Calvin had intercepted from Derek's network. Cheryl was living a quiet, harmless life instead of enabling another predator. Emma was safe, happy, and preparing for a future unburdened by the trauma Derek had planned to inflict. "No," Marcus said finally. "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret protecting our family. Even if it made us, what? Criminals?" Marcus met her eyes steadily. "Emma, there are laws written by politicians, and there are laws written by nature. Politicians say we should have called the police and hoped for justice. Nature says we protect what matters most, regardless of the cost." Emma nodded, understanding flooding her young features. She had learned harsh lessons about the world's realities, but she had also learned that some people would always stand between her and harm. "I love you, Dad," she said simply. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." That afternoon, Marcus received a call on his secure phone. The number was blocked, but he recognized Calvin Bond's voice immediately. "You might want to turn on the news," Calvin said without preamble. "Channel 7, Dallas." Marcus found a remote and tuned to the specified channel. The afternoon news was running a story about a massive federal investigation into financial crimes involving luxury interior design firms. The reporter mentioned several arrests, including Derek McMahon's business partner, Adrian McMullen. "Turns out Derek's network was bigger than we thought," Calvin explained. "The FBI has been tracking them for 2 years. Derek's disappearance actually helped break the case. Without him, the others got sloppy." Marcus watched as the news showed perp walks and crime scene footage. Derek's mysterious disappearance was mentioned only briefly, as authorities focused on the criminals they could actually prosecute. "Any chance this comes back to us?" Marcus asked. "Zero," Calvin replied confidently. "Derek McMahon is officially a fugitive who fled before the net closed. His death is cleaner this way. No one's looking for a body when they think he's hiding in South America." After the call ended, Marcus turned off the television and found Emma in her room, studying for her final high school exams. She looked up as he entered. "Good news?" she asked, reading his expression. "The best kind," Marcus replied. "The kind that closes books permanently." That evening, they cooked dinner together, pasta with Marcus's grandmother's marinara recipe, garlic bread, and a salad from their own garden. It was a simple meal, but it represented everything they had fought to preserve: family, tradition, and the peace to enjoy both without threat. As they cleaned up, Emma paused at the kitchen window. "Dad, do you think we'll ever have to do anything like that again?" Marcus joined her at the window, looking out at the lake where loons called across the darkening water. "I hope not, sweetheart. But if we do—" "I know," Emma said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "We'll face it together." Marcus put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, feeling the fierce pride that came from knowing she understood what family really meant. They had paid a terrible price for that understanding, but some lessons could only be learned in blood and darkness. Outside, the Montana wilderness stretched endlessly in all directions, a testament to the idea that some places remained beyond the reach of civilization's complications. Here, the only laws that mattered were the ones written in nature's brutal clarity: protect what you love, destroy what threatens it, and never apologize for doing what survival demands. As father and daughter stood together in the gathering darkness, they knew with absolute certainty that Marcus Bright and Emma Adams Bright would face whatever came next, as they had faced everything else, together, uncompromising, and utterly without mercy for anyone foolish enough to threaten their family again. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 8 times, marking another peaceful evening in their